Hey everyone, welcome back to another story while we build in our Minecraft world. This tale is something else. We're diving into a story about someone who helped their roommate cover up what they thought was self-defense, only to discover they'd been living with a serial predator the entire time. Before we get started, I just want to take a second to thank everyone who's been commenting and showing support lately. It's been awesome seeing both familiar faces and new names popping up in the comments. You're the reason this channel keeps growing and getting better each week. Now, grab something warm to drink, get comfortable, and let's talk about what happens when trust becomes a weapon and your roommate's late night panic turns into the beginning of a nightmare you never saw coming. Our story starts on an ordinary Tuesday night when Jake came home covered in blood, and everything changed forever. I lived with Jake for 2 years before everything fell apart. He was the kind of roommate you barely noticed, which honestly felt like winning the lottery in the beginning. Paid rent on time, kept his space clean, didn't blast music at 3 in the morning. We weren't friends exactly, more like two people who existed in the same apartment and occasionally nodded at each other in the kitchen. I thought I had it figured out. I thought I knew who I was living with. Then one night in late September, Jake came home covered in blood. I was on the couch watching some forgettable Netflix show when I heard his key scraping in the lock. The door opened and there he stood, white shirt soaked through with dark red stains, hands trembling, eyes wild with something I'd never seen before. Panic, maybe, or fear. He looked at me like a cornered animal and I just froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This was Jake, quiet, boring Jake, who worked in IT and ate the same turkey sandwich for lunch every single day. He shut the door behind him, locked it, and his voice came out in this desperate whisper. He begged me to help him, said it was self-defense, said some guy jumped him outside a bar downtown, tried to rob him, pulled a knife. Jake showed me bruises forming on his ribs, a cut on his forearm that looked fresh. His whole body was shaking, and I remember thinking he looked genuinely terrified, like someone who just survived something horrible. And I believed him. I still don't know why I didn't call the police right then. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was some misguided sense of loyalty to a roommate who'd never caused me problems. Maybe I was just stupid. But when he asked me to help him clean up, I said yes. We spent the next 3 hours scrubbing blood out of his car. I'm talking every surface, every crack in the leather seats, the steering wheel, the dashboard. We used bleach, ammonia, everything we could find under the kitchen sink. Then we drove to this empty lot on the edge of town and burned his clothes in the metal barrel we found. The whole time Jake kept thanking me, kept saying I saved his life, kept insisting it was self-defense and he just panicked. And I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, that I was helping someone who'd been attacked, that this was what decent people did. We never spoke about it again after that night. Not once. Jake went back to being quiet, boring Jake. I went back to my routine. Life continued like nothing happened, and I convinced myself that's exactly what it was. Nothing. A terrible situation that we'd handled and moved past. 3 months went by, and I almost forgot about it. Almost. Then one Saturday afternoon, I needed my toolbox. I'd lent it to Jake weeks earlier for some furniture assembly project, and kept forgetting to ask for it back. He wasn't home, so I figured I'd just grab it from his room. We had that kind of arrangement where it wasn't weird to go in each other's spaces and stuff like that. I opened his door, scanned the room, didn't see the toolbox anywhere obvious. Checked his closet. Nothing. That's when I noticed the corner of a cardboard box sticking out from under his bed. I pulled it out thinking maybe the toolbox was inside. Instead, I found IDs, 7 of them, all with different names, different faces, but something about the eyes in each photo made my stomach drop. They all had that same common look. Driver's licenses from different states, credit cards, social security cards. I kept digging, and that's when I found the newspaper clippings. Missing persons cases, all young men in their 20s and 30s, all from different cities across the Midwest. All disappeared within the last 5 years. Someone had highlighted certain details in each article. Dates, locations, physical descriptions. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped everything. I pulled out my phone and started photographing every single item in that box. Every ID, every clipping. Every handwritten note I found tucked between the documents. That's when I heard his key in the lock. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, back to how I barely escaped my roommate that night. Pure adrenaline took over. I shoved everything back into the box, pushed it under his bed exactly how I'd found it, and bolted to my room. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it through the walls. I heard him walk in, heard his footsteps move through the apartment, heard him pause outside my door. For what felt like an eternity, he just stood there. I held my breath. Finally, his footsteps moved away toward his own room. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept thinking about those IDs, those faces, those clippings. Kept thinking about the night I helped Jake clean blood out of his car. Kept wondering if that really was self-defense, or if I'd helped him cover up something so much worse. By morning, I'd made my decision. I left the apartment early, telling Jake I had errands to run. Instead, I went to a convenience store 3 miles away and bought a burner phone with cash. Found a quiet park bench and called the non-emergency police line. Asked to speak with a detective. Told them everything. The blood, the cleanup, the box under the bed, the photos I'd taken. Gave them my address and Jake's full name. They told me to stay away from the apartment. Said they'd handle it. I spent the next 6 hours at a coffee shop across town, drinking burnt coffee and refreshing the news on my phone every 30 seconds. Finally, around 4 in the afternoon, I got a call from a detective asking me to come down to the station. They'd raided our apartment, found the box, found more evidence hidden in places I'd never thought to look. Jake was in custody. The detective told me they'd been investigating similar disappearances for years, but never had enough data. My photos and testimony gave them what they needed. This feels like something you'd see in a true crime documentary, except I was living in the same apartment the whole time and had no idea. Jake's in prison now awaiting trial on 4 murder charges, with more potentially coming as they connect additional cases. The detective told me other families finally have answers because I made that call, that I saved lives by coming forward when I did. The prosecutor said my testimony was crucial, that without it they might not have been able to build their case. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about situations like this. I still wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about that night I helped him. Thinking about the blood we scrubbed out of his car, wondering if that really was self-defense like he claimed, or if I helped him cover up murder. I'll never know for certain. That uncertainty lives in my head rent-free now. I testified against him, stood in that courtroom and told them everything. About the night he came home covered in blood, about believing his story, about what I found under his bed. Jake stared at me the whole time with this blank expression like I was a stranger. Maybe that's what I always was to him, just another person he needed to use for a while. The prosecutor keeps telling me I did the right thing, that I'm a hero for coming forward, but I don't feel like a hero. I feel like someone who was catastrophically stupid for 3 whole months, someone who helped a serial killer clean up evidence because I couldn't be bothered to ask harder questions. I moved out the day after they arrested him, found a new place across town. I don't tell people this story at parties. Sometimes I think about those families who finally got answers, about the people Jake hurt who I'll never meet, about the ones who might still be alive if I'd called the police that first night instead of grabbing the bleach. That's the part that keeps me up, not the fear or the shock or even the betrayal, just the knowing that I had a choice that night and I made the wrong one. They say hindsight is 20/20, but that doesn't really help when you're lying awake at 4 in the morning, replaying every conversation you ever had with someone, looking for signs you missed. And trust me, I found plenty once I started looking. The way Jake never talked about his past, how he paid for everything in cash. That time I asked about his family, and he changed the subject so fast I got whiplash. All these little red flags I ignored because it was easier to have a quiet roommate than a complicated one. I don't know what happens next. The trial's still months away. I'll have to testify again, probably multiple times, but at least I know I finally did the right thing, even if it came 3 months too late. And I guess that's going to have to be enough, because it's all I've got. But speaking of discovering things you were never meant to see, the next person's vacation shock hit completely different. My boyfriend Marcus said he was going to a work conference in Denver. He seemed stressed about it, so I didn't ask many questions. Honestly, I should have. But at the time, I was trying to be the supportive girlfriend, you know. He'd been working long hours, seemed burnt out, and when he mentioned this conference, I just figured it was another one of those corporate obligation things he had to suffer through. He left on a Thursday morning with his rolling suitcase and his laptop bag, gave me a quick kiss, and said he'd call me when he landed. The first 2 days were normal. A few texts here and there, nothing suspicious. He complained about the hotel Wi-Fi and sent me a picture of what he claimed was a sad conference lunch. I sent back a laughing emoji and went about my day. I had no reason to doubt him. We'd been together for almost 3 years. We talked about moving in together permanently. I thought we were solid. Then on day 3, something happened that I can only describe as divine intervention, or the universe deciding I deserved to know the truth. I was working from home, sitting at our shared desk in the living room with my laptop open, when I noticed Marcus's iPad on the shelf. He'd left it behind, which wasn't unusual, since he mostly used it for streaming shows. The thing was connected to our home Wi-Fi, and apparently it had been silently syncing to our shared iCloud photo library the entire time he'd been gone. I glanced over at my laptop screen mid-email and saw the Photos app updating. New images were downloading. I wouldn't have thought twice about it except one of the thumbnails caught my eye. It was bright blue water, turquoise, tropical, definitely not Denver in February. I stopped typing and clicked on the photo library. What I saw made my stomach drop so fast I thought I might actually be sick. There was Marcus, on a yacht. Not a conference room yacht or some corporate team-building nonsense. An actual luxury yacht with white leather seats and champagne glasses. He was shirtless, sunglasses on, arm draped around a woman in a bright red bikini. She was gorgeous, tanned, laughing at something off camera. And Marcus looked happier than I'd seen him in months. I sat there frozen for a second, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an old photo, maybe it was a work thing, and the woman was a colleague. But the metadata doesn't lie. I clicked through to the details. The photo was taken 2 days ago. Location, Nassau, Bahamas. Then came the breaking point. I started scrolling. There were hundreds of photos. Marcus kissing this woman at sunset. Marcus feeding her dessert at what looked like a 5-star restaurant. Hotel room selfies, the kind couples take when they're on a romantic getaway. Beach walks, poolside cocktails, his hand on her waist, her head on his shoulder. They looked like a couple in a travel magazine. Every single photo was time-stamped within the last 3 days, and every single one was geotagged to different spots around the Bahamas. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the mouse. I kept clicking, hoping somehow I'd find something that explained this away, but it just got worse. The photos went back further than this trip. I opened the metadata panel and started checking dates. There were images from 4 months ago, 6 months ago, even 8 months ago. Different locations, Miami, Cancun, Turks and Caicos, all overlapping with what Marcus had told me were work trips. He'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. I created a new folder on my desktop and started dragging every single photo into it. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed evidence. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. While I was copying files, I noticed something else. Some of the photos had tagged locations from Instagram. I didn't even know Marcus had a second Instagram account. I grabbed my phone and searched for his name with a few different variations until I found it. Private account, different profile picture, completely separate from the one I followed. I felt like I was in a fever dream. Who was this person? The account was locked, but the profile picture was him and the woman from the photos, both smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. I scrolled down to the tagged photos section and found her account. It was public. I clicked on it and my heart just shattered. Her entire feed was full of them. Couple photos, romantic captions. She'd tagged him in posts from 6 months ago, with captions like "My love" and "Forever with you." There was even a post from 3 weeks ago where she called him her boyfriend of 8 months. 8 months. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to piece together the timeline. 8 months ago, Marcus and I had just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. He'd taken me to this nice Italian restaurant and told me he wanted to start looking at apartments together. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And apparently, a month later, he started dating someone else. Not just hooking up, dating. A whole separate relationship with vacations and Instagram posts and inside jokes. Imagine being this confidently wrong about your entire life. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too stunned. I just sat there refreshing her Instagram, scrolling through post after post of this woman living a life with my boyfriend that I didn't even know existed. There were photos of them at brunches I wasn't invited to, concerts I didn't know he went to, weekend trips he'd claimed were work obligations or guys' weekends. It was like looking at a parallel universe where Marcus was a completely different person. And maybe that's what hurt the most. He wasn't just cheating, he was living an entire double life. I spent the next hour downloading everything. Screenshots of her Instagram, screenshots of his secret account, the photos from the shared library, the metadata showing dates and locations. I backed it all up to a cloud drive and a USB stick because I wasn't taking any chances. Then I just waited. Marcus came home 2 days later. I heard his key in the lock and felt my heart start pounding, but I kept my face neutral. He walked in looking tired, dragging his suitcase behind him, and gave me this weary smile like he'd just survived the most exhausting work trip of his life. He kissed me on the forehead and started talking about how terrible the conference was. Boring panels, bad hotel coffee, awkward networking events. He went on, and I just nodded along, letting him dig himself deeper. He asked what I'd been up to. I said, oh, just working, watching some shows, normal stuff. He didn't notice that I'd rearranged the living room slightly so the TV was facing the couch at a better angle. He didn't notice that I'd connected my laptop to the TV earlier that day. He just dropped his suitcase, sat down on the couch, and asked if I wanted to order dinner. I said sure. Then I picked up the remote. Actually, before we do that, I said, keeping my voice calm, I wanted to show you something. I watched his face as I pulled up the folder on the TV screen. The first photo popped up, Marcus on the yacht, him and the woman in the red bikini. His expression went from confused to horrified in about half a second. The color literally drained from his face. He tried to say something, stumbled over his words, then tried to grab the remote from me. I held it away and kept clicking through, photo after photo. I didn't say anything. I just let him watch his lies play out on our TV in full high definition. When I finally stopped clicking, he was just sitting there, mouth open, looking like he wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. He started with the usual script. It's not what it looks like. I can explain. You don't understand. But his voice had no conviction. He sounded like someone reading lines from a play he didn't believe in. I asked him one question. Who is she? He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. He tried to say she was his cousin. His cousin. I actually laughed. It was such a stupid, lazy lie that I couldn't help it. I pulled up her Instagram on my phone and showed him the posts where she called him her boyfriend. The captions, the dates, the timeline. He went quiet. Then he tried a different approach. He said it was complicated, that he'd made a mistake, that it had just started recently, and he didn't know how to end it. But I'd already done the math. 8 months wasn't recent. 8 months was a third of our relationship. 8 months was intentional. I asked if there were others. He said no. I didn't believe him. At that point, I'm not sure I believed anything that came out of his mouth. He started crying, saying he loved me, that he didn't want to lose me, that he'd end things with her right now if I'd just give him another chance. He reached for my hand and I pulled away. Here's where it gets absurd. I told him I didn't need him to end things with her. I'd already packed his stuff. I pointed to the hallway where I'd stacked 3 boxes and his second suitcase. Everything he'd left at my place over the past 3 years. Clothes, toiletries, books, that stupid coffee mug he always used. All of it, boxed up and ready to go. He stared at the boxes like he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. He asked if I was serious. I told him I'd never been more serious in my life. He tried to argue, said we should talk about this, that I was being rash, that people make mistakes. I cut him off and told him the only mistake here was me trusting him. Then I asked him to leave. He didn't move at first, just sat there looking pathetic and lost. So I grabbed my phone and told him if he didn't leave in the next 5 minutes, I was going to send every single photo and screenshot to his mother, his boss, and anyone else I could think of. That got him moving. He grabbed the boxes, muttering under his breath about how I was overreacting, how I'd regret this. I didn't respond. I just held the door open and waited. When he finally left, I locked the door behind him and stood there for a minute, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I blocked his number, blocked him on every social media platform, blocked his email. I thought about messaging the other woman to let her know. But honestly, I was too exhausted. If she wanted to date a guy who was that good at lying, that was her problem now. I deleted the photos from the shared library, changed all my passwords, and poured myself the largest glass of wine I could find. Marcus tried calling from different numbers over the next few days, 53 times to be exact. I let every single call go to voicemail. He sent emails, long rambling apologies that contradicted themselves every other paragraph. I deleted them without reading past the first line. He even showed up at my apartment once, but I'd already told my building's front desk not to let him up. Security escorted him out. The hardest part wasn't missing him. It was realizing how much of our relationship had been a performance. How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied? How many vacations had he taken without me, while I sat at home thinking he was grinding away at work? I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner, but how could I have? He was careful, methodical. He knew exactly how to play both sides. You almost have to admire the audacity, in a sick way. A few weeks later, I found out through mutual friends that he and the other woman had broken up. Apparently, she'd found out about me after seeing some of my comments on his main Instagram from before he'd blocked me. She confronted him, he tried to lie his way out of it, and she dumped him on the spot. The poetic justice of it all almost made me laugh. He'd lost both of us in the span of a month because he couldn't keep his lies straight. I haven't spoken to Marcus since that night. I don't plan to. Every now and then I think about what I would have done if his iPad hadn't synced when it did. How long would he have kept it going? Would I have eventually married him, completely unaware that I was sharing him with someone else? The thought makes my skin crawl, but at least I found out through photos. At least I had evidence. At least I didn't waste another 3 years on someone who saw me as optional. At least I found out through photos. But what happens when the evidence is way more damaging than just pictures? I worked in finance for 3 years under a VP named David. And if you've ever had a boss who treated your accomplishments like his personal trophy collection, you know exactly the type of guy I'm talking about. Every deal I closed, every client I landed, somehow became his victory in the next management meeting. I'd be in the room watching him present my work with this smug smile, while I sat there thinking about how much I hated corporate politics. But I kept my head down, played the game, told myself it was temporary, and then eventually hard work would speak for itself. That's what they tell you, right? Do good work and you'll get rewarded. Turns out that's only true if your boss isn't actively working against you. The breaking point came when I landed the biggest client of my career. This wasn't some small account. We're talking a major corporation that would have brought in millions for the firm and doubled my commission for the year. I'd been cultivating this relationship for 8 months. Dinners, presentations, revisions, calls at midnight because the client was 3 time zones away. I put everything into this deal. When I finally closed it, I was on top of the world. Sent the signed contract to David, expecting at least a congratulations, maybe even a thank you. Instead, I got a meeting request for the following Monday. No context. Just a calendar invite that made my stomach drop for reasons I couldn't quite explain. That Monday, I walked into his office and he didn't even look up from his computer. Just told me HR needed to see me immediately. Said it was urgent. I asked what it was about and he gave me this thin smile and said he couldn't discuss it. The walk to HR felt like a funeral march. They sat me down in a conference room with 2 HR reps and the head of our department. Told me they'd received an anonymous tip about falsified expense reports. Said there was evidence I'd been inflating my business expenses and pocketing the difference for months. They had spreadsheets, highlighted discrepancies, copies of receipts that supposedly didn't match my submissions. I tried to defend myself, but they'd already made up their minds. They told me my employment was terminated effective immediately, and that I needed to pack my desk and leave the building within the hour. Security would escort me out. They said it was company policy for terminations involving potential fraud. The humiliation of that walk back to my desk is something I still feel in my bones. Everyone staring. Whispers following me down the hallway. Security standing there watching me dump 3 years of my life into a cardboard box. And David, he walked past my desk while I was packing and had the audacity to look sympathetic, actually put his hand on my shoulder and said he was sorry it had to end this way. I wanted to scream. I left that building thinking my career was over, that I'd never work in finance again, that David had won. Here's the thing about people who get away with stuff for too long. They get sloppy. David made one critical mistake. He coordinated the whole setup using his work email. And here's where it gets beautiful. 6 months earlier, I'd been part of a task force reviewing old project files. They'd given me administrative access to our shared drive archives to pull historical data. Standard stuff. The project ended, but nobody ever revoked my access. I still had the login credentials saved in my password manager. About a week after I got fired, I was lying awake at 3 in the morning doing that thing where you replay every conversation looking for what you missed. And suddenly I remembered that shared drive. Remembered that David stored everything there because he didn't trust the regular server backups. I grabbed my laptop and logged in. It took me 4 hours to find what I needed. I searched every variation of my name, the client name, expense reports, anything that might connect. And there it was, an entire email chain between David and someone in accounting named Patricia. They'd been planning this for weeks. The emails were everything. David complaining about me landing the big client. Patricia suggesting they could make it look like I'd been committing fraud. Back and forth discussions about which expense reports to alter, how to make the numbers look suspicious. What story to tell HR? There was even a draft termination letter dated 2 weeks before the anonymous tip supposedly came in. They'd planned my firing before they even manufactured the evidence. But that wasn't even the worst part. The emails also showed they'd split my commission between them. David got the credit for closing the deal, and Patricia helped him process the paperwork to redirect my earnings. They literally stole money from me and then framed me to cover their tracks. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling this cold rage settle over me. These people hadn't just fired me. They'd tried to destroy my entire career over greed, over a commission check. I spent the rest of that night taking screenshots of everything, downloaded the full email threads, organized it all into a folder with timestamps and context notes. Then I sent it everywhere. CEO, board of directors, company ethics hotline, legal department. Every single person who had the power to do something about it got a detailed email from me at 6 in the morning with all the evidence attached. I kept the message simple, explained what happened, let the emails speak for themselves, hit send and waited. By 9 that morning, David was suspended pending investigation. By noon, the CEO's office had called me asking if I'd be willing to meet. By end of week, both David and Patricia were fired. No severance, no references, just gone. The company offered me my job back with a settlement for the wrongful termination. They tried to frame it as them doing me a favor, like I should be grateful they were fixing the problem they created. I looked at their offer and laughed, told them I'd think about it. Instead, I took the settlement money and hired a lawyer, filed a wrongful termination lawsuit with all those emails as evidence. The company's legal team tried to fight it at first, but once they realized how bad this would look in court, how much documentation I had of their VP literally conspiring to commit fraud, they settled fast. I won 6 figures, more money than that commission would have ever paid out, enough to take a year off and figure out what I actually wanted to do, instead of working for people like David. You want to know the best part? I found out through a former co-worker that David's working at a call center now. Can't get hired anywhere else in finance because word spreads fast about stuff like this. Patricia lost her accounting license. Their careers are done and I'm sitting here financially secure because they got greedy and stupid. The company tried to get me to sign an NDA as part of the settlement. I refused. Told them if they wanted to pay me to be quiet, it would cost triple. They paid. So I can't talk about specifics, but I can say this much. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just making sure the right people see the receipts. I thought about going back into finance, but honestly the whole thing left a bad taste. Instead, I've been consulting independently, setting my own rates, choosing my own clients. No more bosses taking credit. No more Davids waiting to stab me in the back over a commission check. People ask me sometimes if I feel bad about what happened to David, if maybe I went too far. And I tell them the same thing every time. I didn't ruin David's career. David ruined David's career. I just made sure everyone knew about it. He could have let me have that client, could have taken his cut and moved on. Instead, he decided my success was somehow his failure and manufactured an entire fraud case to take me down. That's not bad luck or a mistake. That's malicious. That's calculated. And people like that don't deserve second chances. I sleep just fine at night knowing he's reading scripts at a call center somewhere, probably still wondering how it all fell apart so fast. probably still thinking he was the smartest guy in the room right up until those emails went public. The thing about building your career on other people's work is eventually you run out of people willing to let you steal from them. David just happened to pick the wrong person on the wrong deal, and that mistake cost him everything. Corporate revenge is sweet, but sometimes the lies hit closer to home, like literally in your own family. My dad died suddenly from a heart attack on a Tuesday morning. No warning signs, no goodbye, just gone. He was only 62. The funeral was packed, standing room only. Dad was one of those people everyone loved, you know. He coached Little League for 20 years, volunteered at the community center, never missed a church potluck. People kept coming up to me saying how lucky I was to have had such a wonderful father, and I nodded and thanked them because that's what you do at funerals, even when you're so numb you can barely feel your own face. The reception was at our church hall. I was standing by the coffee table, trying to figure out how to politely escape from my aunt's third retelling of some story about Dad fixing her fence in the 90s, when this guy around my age walked up to me. Mid-20s, tall, wearing a dark suit that looked like he'd bought it specifically for today. He had this nervous energy about him, like he was working up the courage to speak. "You must be Sarah," he said. I nodded, trying to place him. Maybe one of Dad's co-workers, a friend's son I'd met once at a barbecue. "I'm Michael," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "I think we need to talk. Maybe outside?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench, but I followed him out to the parking lot anyway. We stood between two cars and he turned to face me fully. That's when I really looked at him. I mean really looked, and my brain just short-circuited. He had Dad's eyes, not just the color but the exact same shape, the same way they crinkled at the corners, the same nose, the same slightly crooked smile that Dad always had in photos. It was like looking at a male version of myself, or a young version of my father, or some weird combination of both. My hands started shaking. "I know this is terrible timing," Michael said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "But my mom just passed away 3 weeks ago, and she left me this letter. I only found out myself a few days ago, and then I saw your dad's obituary online, and I just needed to come here. I needed to see if it was real." He handed me a birth certificate. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. There was his name, Michael James Harrison. Date of birth, October 15th, 6 months after I was born. And under father's name, there it was, my dad's full name, Daniel Robert Mitchell. The parking lot started spinning. "My mom had an affair with your dad," Michael said quietly, and I could hear the shakiness in his voice too. "It lasted years, apparently. She explained everything in the letter, about him, about you and your family, about where to find my half-siblings. I'm so sorry to do this today. I know this is the worst possible time, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't just show up at your house later, and I couldn't keep this inside, and I just thought you deserved to know." I couldn't speak. I literally could not form words. I just stood there holding this birth certificate, looking at this stranger who had my father's face, trying to process what he was telling me. My dad. My dad who coached Little League and fixed neighbors' fences and never missed Sunday dinner. My dad had another son, but that wasn't even the worst part. "There's more," Michael said, and I actually laughed. It was this horrible, strangled sound that came out of nowhere. "I have 2 younger siblings, Emma and Lucas. They're inside right now, at the funeral. They didn't know about any of this either until I got Mom's letter." I called my older brother Derek immediately, pulled out my phone right there in the parking lot, and told him to get outside now. He came out 2 minutes later looking annoyed until he saw my face. Then he saw Michael. I watched Derek go through the same thing I just experienced. The confusion, the recognition, the dawning horror. The 3 of us met that evening at a diner on the edge of town. Michael brought his siblings. Emma was 19, Lucas was 17. They looked shell-shocked. We all did. We sat in a corner booth that was way too small for 6 people and started comparing stories, trying to piece together the puzzle of our father's double life. Turns out Dad had a whole other existence 2 towns over. Michael's mom lived in Riverside, about 40 minutes away. Dad told our family he had regional sales meetings twice a week. Told Michael's family he worked construction with irregular hours. He had dinner with them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He went to Emma's dance recitals. He taught Lucas how to drive. He promised Michael's mom he'd leave us eventually, Start fresh, make things right. He'd been doing this for 30 years. Michael showed us photos on his phone, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. A photo of Dad teaching Emma to ride a bike. Another of him and Lucas at a baseball game. On every single picture, Dad looked happy. Not guilty, not conflicted. Just happy. Like he genuinely loved being there. Like he wasn't actively lying to two separate families every single day. "Did your mum know?" Emma asked quietly, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to say no. There's no way Mum would have said something. But even as I opened my mouth, I remembered things. Little things I'd dismissed over the years. The way Mum never questioned Dad's Tuesday and Thursday absences. How she'd get this tight look on her face whenever anyone asked about Dad's work schedule. The time I was 12 and found her crying in the bathroom, and she said it was just allergies. But her eyes had that hollow look that had nothing to do with pollen. Derek and I went to see Mom that same night. She was still at the house, still surrounded by casserole dishes from neighbors and flowers from the funeral. She took one look at our faces and just crumpled. She'd known the whole time. Here's where it gets absurd. Mum said she found out about Michael when he was 2 years old. Some woman from Dad's office had seen them together at a park in Riverside and mentioned it to a mutual friend, and eventually the gossip made its way back to Mum. She confronted Dad. He confessed everything. The affair, the child, all of it. And Mom made a choice. She chose to stay. She said she couldn't bear to lose him, that he promised it was over, that he'd end things with Michael's mom, that it would never happen again. And she believed him, or maybe she just wanted to believe him. She never asked questions about his Tuesday and Thursday meetings, never checked his phone or followed him or demanded proof. She just looked the other way and convinced herself that ignorance was better than the alternative. Except it wasn't over. It never ended. Dad kept going to Riverside, kept living his double life, and Mom kept pretending not to notice. For 30 years. I don't know if I've ever felt more betrayed in my life. And that's saying something considering I just found out my dead father had a secret second family. But at least Dad was gone. At least he couldn't defend himself or make excuses. Mum was sitting right there, alive and coherent, telling me she'd chosen to let this happen, that she'd known I had half-siblings out there and never said a word. Derek lost it, started yelling about trust and honesty, and how could she do this to us? I just sat there feeling numb again, that same disconnected feeling from the funeral, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Mum kept crying and apologizing, saying she did it for us, to keep the family together. But that was a lie too. She did it for herself, because she was scared of being alone or starting over or whatever. And now we were all sitting in the wreckage of her cowardice. We left without saying goodbye. I don't think I spoke to Derek the entire drive home. What was there to say? Our entire childhood was built on a foundation of lies. Every family dinner, every holiday, every moment we thought we were a happy, normal family was just theatre. Dad was somewhere else in his head, thinking about his other kids. Mom was pretending not to know. And Derek and I were the only ones who didn't get the script. The really messed up part is that Michael and Emma and Lucas are actually great. We've been trying to build relationships over the past few months, meeting for coffee, texting occasionally, trying to figure out how to be siblings when we're all basically strangers. But it's so surreal. Every time we get together, I look at them and see my dad's features rearranged into different faces. Every time Emma laughs, it sounds like Derek. Every time Lucas makes a sarcastic comment, it's something I would say. They're my family, but they're also walking evidence of the biggest betrayal of my life. Last month we all had dinner together, all 6 of us. Well, 5. Mom wasn't invited. We went to this Italian place downtown and sat at a big table in the back. The server asked if we were celebrating something, and Michael said family reunion without a trace of irony. We ordered too much food and spent 3 hours just talking. About Dad, about our childhoods, about the weird parallel lives we'd lived without knowing about each other. Lucas told this story about Dad teaching him to change a tire when he was 14. I had the exact same memory, same age, probably around the same time. Dad had been rotating tire-changing lessons between families. We all just sat there for a second after that, not sure whether to laugh or cry. This feels like something you'd pitch to a TV writer, and they'd reject it for being too unbelievable. Emma asked if it gets easier. I told her I'd let her know when I figured that out. The truth is, I don't know if it does. Every family dinner still feels like I'm in the wrong timeline. Like I'm going to blink and wake up in the real world where Dad only had 2 kids and Mom didn't spend 3 decades lying to our faces. But we keep showing up anyway. Keep trying to build something real out of all these broken pieces, because at the end of the day, none of this was Michael's fault, or Emma's fault, or Lucas's fault. They didn't ask for this any more than I did. We're all just collateral damage from our parents' choices. Derek asked me the other day if I've forgiven Mom. I haven't. I don't know if I ever will. She calls sometimes and I let it go to voicemail. She sends texts asking to talk and I leave them on read. Maybe that makes me petty, but I'm not ready yet. Maybe I never will be. What I do know is that I have 3 new siblings who didn't choose this mess any more than I did. And if we can find a way to be family despite everything, that might be the only good thing that comes from any of this. It's not the family I thought I had, but maybe it's the one I was supposed to have all along. Family secrets have a way of exploding at the worst times, but one woman's discovery made funeral drama look tame. I was sitting next to Emma on the couch watching some forgettable Netflix show when her phone lit up on the coffee table. She'd just gotten up to take a shower, and normally I wouldn't even glance at her notifications. We had a good relationship, trusted each other, knew each other's passwords, but never really used them because we didn't need to. That's how solid I thought we were. But the preview message on her lock screen made my stomach drop. It was from a group chat called Girls' Night, and the message read, "Is tonight the night you do it?" with about 6 laughing emojis after it. Something about the phrasing felt off. The tone felt wrong. I sat there staring at her phone for a solid minute, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe they were talking about some surprise or a gift, or literally anything innocent, but my gut was screaming at me to look. So I did. I unlocked her phone with the passcode I'd seen her type 1,000 times and opened the group chat. What I found made my blood run cold. They'd been planning my breakup for 3 weeks, not discussing whether Emma should break up with me or helping her work through relationship doubts. Actually planning the logistics of how she'd end things like it. It was some kind of military operation. The messages went back weeks. Her friends asking when she was finally going to Emma saying she needed to find the right time. Them suggesting our favorite restaurant because it would be public and I'd be less likely to make a scene. I scrolled up and found a message from 2 weeks ago where one of her friends had literally written out a breakup speech for her. Classic lines like, "It's not you, it's me," and "I need to focus on myself right now." Emma had screenshot it and said, "Perfect, using this." They discussed every detail, what she'd wear, how she'd stay calm if I got emotional. One friend advised her not to engage if I tried to argue or ask questions. Another said she should keep it short, deliver the speech, and leave quickly. There was even a backup plan in case I made a scene, where her friend Michelle would be waiting in her car outside, ready to pick Emma up if needed. I felt sick reading this, like I was watching my relationship get dissected by people who saw me as nothing more than a problem to be solved. They discussed which mutual friends Emma should keep and which ones she'd let me have, literally dividing up our social circle like assets in a divorce. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I scrolled further, I found messages from last month, where Emma told the group she'd met someone at work. His name was Tyler. She said he was sweet and funny, and they'd been flirting for weeks. Her friends encouraged her to go for it, told her she deserved to be happy, that she shouldn't feel guilty about exploring her options. Then I found the message that made my hands shake. From 3 weeks ago, Emma writing, "I did it. Slept with Tyler last night. I feel terrible, but also I don't. He makes me feel things I haven't felt in so long." Her friends congratulating her, telling her this was a sign she needed to do things with me. One of them literally wrote, "You can't stay with him now. You need to rip the Band-Aid off." I sat there holding her phone, trying to process what I was reading. Emma had been cheating on me for a month with a co-worker named Tyler, and instead of just breaking up with me like an adult, she'd turned it into this elaborate plan with her friends, where I was the obstacle she needed to remove cleanly from her life. The messages showed she'd already started moving her stuff out slowly, taking things from my apartment bit by bit, so she wouldn't have to come back after the breakup. Her friend Ashley had written, "Make sure you get your stuff from his place first so you don't have to see him again." Emma replied, "Already on it, been grabbing things all week." I heard the shower turn off and realized I had maybe 3 minutes before she came back. I forwarded the entire chat history to myself. Every message, every screenshot, every casual discussion about how to dump me while minimizing her inconvenience. Sent it all to my email and my phone. Then I put her phone back exactly where it was and stood up. I went to our bedroom and started packing. Grabbed my duffel bag from the closet and just started throwing clothes into it. Toiletries, chargers, the book on my nightstand. I wasn't thinking clearly, just moving on autopilot, trying to get out before I completely lost it. Emma walked out of the bathroom in her robe, hair wet, and froze when she saw me packing. She asked what I was doing, and her voice had this edge of panic that would have been satisfying if I wasn't so numb. I didn't look at her, just kept packing. She asked again, louder this time, and I finally stopped, picked up her phone from where I'd left it on the bed and handed it to her. Told her she could cancel the reservation at our favorite restaurant because we were done. I watched the color drain from her face, watched her realize exactly what I'd seen. She tried to say something, but I cut her off. Told her I'd forwarded everything to myself so she shouldn't bother trying to delete it, that I knew about the 3-week plan, about Tyler, about the breakup speech her friends wrote, about how she'd been slowly moving her stuff out of my place like I was too stupid to notice. Things went from bad to unhinged. Emma started crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from genuine remorse, but the panicked crying of someone who just got caught. She tried to explain, said it wasn't what it looked like, that the chat was just her venting and her friends got carried away, that nothing happened with Tyler. I actually laughed at that one, asked her if she really thought I believed that after reading "Slept with Tyler last night," in her own words. She switched tactics, got angry, asked how dare I go through her phone, said I violated her privacy and that I was being controlling, like I was the one in the wrong here, like I was the one who'd been planning a breakup while sleeping with someone else. The audacity was genuinely impressive. I zipped up my bag and told her I was leaving. She grabbed my arm, begging me to stay and talk about this, promising she'd end things with Tyler, that we could work through this, that she loved me. I pulled my arm away and told her if she loved me, she wouldn't have spent 3 weeks coordinating my breakup with her friends while cheating on me. I walked out of that apartment and didn't look back. Got in my car and drove to my buddy's place across town. He took one look at my face and just handed me a beer without asking questions. I crashed on his couch that night with my phone blowing up. Emma called 53 times, sent probably 100 texts, started with apologies, moved to anger, cycled back to begging. Her friends started messaging me too, Ashley telling me I was overreacting, Michelle saying I needed to hear Emma out. I blocked all of them, every single number. But before I blocked everyone, I did one thing. I sent screenshots of the group chat to our mutual friends. Not out of spite, though I won't pretend that wasn't part of it, but because I knew Emma would try to control the narrative. Would tell everyone I freaked out over nothing, or that we just grew apart, or whatever story made her look better. I wanted people to know the truth. The responses were split. Some people thought I was justified. Others thought airing private messages was a low blow. I didn't really care either way. I just wanted everyone to know that when Emma inevitably showed up at the next group hangout with Tyler on her arm, they'd know exactly how that relationship started. A week later, Emma showed up at my new place. I'd moved in with my buddy temporarily, while I looked for my own apartment. She somehow found the address and knocked on the door at 10 at night. My buddy answered and told her I wasn't there. She didn't believe him. Started crying on the doorstep, saying she just needed 5 minutes to explain. I was there. I heard the whole thing from the living room, but I didn't go to the door. I'd said everything I needed to say the night I left. There was nothing she could tell me that would change what happened. No explanation that would make planning my breakup with her friends while sleeping with her coworker somehow acceptable. My buddy eventually got her to leave by threatening to call the cops for trespassing. She left, but not before shouting through the door that I was making a huge mistake, that we were supposed to be together, that she'd changed her mind about breaking up. The irony of that statement is still hilarious to me. She'd changed her mind about breaking up with me after I'd already broken up with her. Like I was supposed to just forget about Tyler and the group chat and the 3-week plan. because she decided she wanted to keep me after all. I found out later through mutual friends that Emma and Tyler are still together, that she told people we broke up because I was controlling and went through her phone without permission, conveniently leaving out the part about why I went through her phone or what I found there. Some people believed her version. Those people aren't my friends anymore. The whole thing taught me that sometimes the person you think you know best is actually a stranger, that trust can be weaponized, that the relationship you think is solid can be crumbling behind your back while everyone but you knows about it. I don't miss Emma. I miss who I thought she was. I miss the relationship I thought we had. But the real Emma, the one who could plan my breakup like a corporate merger while sleeping with someone else, that person I'm glad to be rid of. It's been 6 months now and I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I've got my own place. Started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm not rushing it. And I learned a valuable lesson about gut instincts. That feeling I got when I saw that message preview wasn't paranoia. It was my subconscious picking up on things I'd been ignoring. The way Emma had been distant lately, how she'd started dressing nicer for work, the way she always had her phone face down, all those little signs I'd written off as nothing were actually something. And now I know to trust that feeling instead of talking myself out of it. Breakups are brutal, but at least most people have the decency to do it themselves, not outsource it to a group chat. Though sometimes the breakup isn't even the main issue. Tyler and I had been dating for 8 months when we decided to take a road trip up the coast. It was supposed to be one of those spontaneous romantic weekend things. We'd been talking about getting away for a while. Just the two of us. No work stress or friend drama. Just open road and good music, and maybe finally having those conversations about where this relationship was actually going. We were about an hour into the drive when my phone died. I'd forgotten to charge it the night before, and of course I'd left my car charger at home. Tyler glanced over and said casually, "Check the glove compartment for a charger. I think I have an extra one in there." I popped it open and saw the charger right away, sitting on top of some papers and napkins. Grabbed it, plugged in my phone, and was about to close the compartment when I noticed something wedged underneath the registration documents. A wallet. Black leather, pretty nice quality. I pulled it out thinking maybe it was an old wallet of Tyler's that he'd forgotten about. But when I opened it, the driver's license inside was for someone named Kevin Chen, not Tyler. The photo showed an Asian guy in his 30s smiling at the camera. There were credit cards with Kevin's name, a gym membership, even a few family photos tucked into the sleeves, kids' school pictures, a wedding photo. "Why do you have someone's wallet?" I asked, holding it up. Tyler's whole face changed. The easy, relaxed expression he'd had a second ago just vanished. He glanced at the wallet, then back at the road, then at me again. "Oh, that. I was going to return it, found it at the gym last week, and kept forgetting to turn it into the front desk. It sounded reasonable. People leave stuff at gyms all the time, but something felt wrong. The wallet looked too well kept, too carefully stored to be something he'd just tossed in there and forgotten about. And why would you keep someone's wallet for a week without trying to return it?" There was literally a phone number on the gym membership card. I opened the center console between us, not really sure what I was looking for. Another wallet, brown leather this time, belonging to someone named Marcus Williams. I felt my stomach drop. "Tyler, what is this? What are you doing? Stop going through my stuff." His voice had an edge to it now. I checked the side pocket of the door. Another wallet. Then I twisted around and felt in the pocket behind his seat. 4 wallets total, all from different people. Different names, different faces, all neatly stored in various compartments of his car, like he was collecting them. That's when everything unraveled. Tyler pulled over onto the shoulder, hazards on, and turned to face me. "Let me explain," he started, and his voice had this pleading quality that I'd never heard before. "It's not what it looks like, okay? I can explain all of this." But I was already pulling out my phone, hands shaking, trying to dial 911. I didn't get past the 9 before Tyler lunged across the center console and grabbed it out of my hand. Before I could react, he rolled down his window and threw my phone out onto the highway. I watched it disappear in the rearview mirror and felt this surge of pure fear. This wasn't about lost wallets someone forgot at the gym. This was something else entirely. Tyler had just thrown my phone out of a moving vehicle to stop me from calling the police. He locked the doors. The click of the locks engaging was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Then he pulled back onto the highway and started driving faster. Not crazy fast, but definitely above the speed limit, deliberately. "You're overreacting," he said, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "You don't understand the situation. Those wallets, yeah, okay, I should have returned them, but it's not like I stole them. People are careless. They leave their stuff lying around and I just happened to pick them up. I was going to give them back." He kept talking, kept trying to explain, but none of it made sense. 4 wallets from 4 different people, all carefully stored, all still containing cash and credit cards. If he'd really been planning to return them, why keep them at all? Why not turn them in immediately? I forced myself to take a breath and pretend to calm down, nodded along like I was starting to understand his perspective. Let my shoulders relax. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay, you're right. I overreacted. I'm sorry." Tyler glanced at me, suspicious but wanting to believe it. "Really? Really, I just got scared. But if you say you were going to return them, I believe you." He seemed to buy it. His grip on the wheel loosened slightly. We drove in silence for another few minutes while I casually reached down and unlocked my door. The sound was covered by the radio and road noise. Tyler didn't notice. At the next red light, I didn't hesitate. Just yanked the door handle, threw myself out of the car, and ran. I heard Tyler yelling behind me, but I didn't look back. There was a gas station on the corner, and I sprinted toward it like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. The clerk behind the counter took one look at my face and asked if I needed help. I told him to call the police. He handed me the store phone, and I gave the dispatcher the address. Tyler's license plate number. Everything I could remember. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and waited. Police arrived in less than 10 minutes. They found Tyler still sitting at that red light, like he'd frozen after I ran. Or maybe he was trying to figure out his next move. Either way, they pulled him over and searched the car with my permission. 4 wallets, just like I'd said. Then they searched his apartment. Things went from bad to unhinged. They found 16 wallets total. 16, hidden in drawers, tucked into coat pockets, stored in a shoebox under his bed. Each one belonging to a different person. Each one still containing identification and payment cards and personal effects. The detective told me later that Tyler was part of a pickpocketing ring that had been working gyms and coffee shops across 3 counties for almost 2 years. They had a whole system. One person would create a distraction, another would lift wallets from bags and coat pockets, and they'd split the cash later. Tyler's job was apparently to hold onto the wallets for a few days before disposing of them, which is why he still had so many. They'd stolen over $40,000 in cash and goods, drained bank accounts, maxed out credit cards, even used people's identities to open new lines of credit. The detective said my call helped them close multiple cases. Families who'd been dealing with identity theft for months finally got answers. People who'd had their life savings wiped out could start recovering their losses. All because I opened a glove compartment looking for a phone charger. I gave my statement at the station, told them everything I knew about Tyler, which honestly wasn't much. We'd been dating for 8 months, but I realized I barely knew him at all. Didn't know where he worked because he'd always been vague about his job. Didn't know his friends because he always said he was a private person. Red flags I'd ignored because I wanted the relationship to work. They asked if I wanted a restraining order. I said yes. They asked if I felt safe going home. I said no. I stayed with my sister for 2 weeks while they processed Tyler's arrest and made sure he couldn't make bail. He tried calling me from jail 37 times in the first 3 days. I never answered. He sent letters. I burned them without reading. His mom even reached out once, trying to convince me that Tyler was a good person who'd made mistakes. I blocked her number. The worst part wasn't the betrayal or the fear, or even the fact that I'd been dating a criminal for 8 months. It was realizing how close I'd come to being complicit. If my phone hadn't died, if I hadn't opened that glove compartment, how long would it have taken me to find out? Would I have eventually noticed money I didn't recognize in his wallet? Would I have questioned the expensive gifts he sometimes gave me, the nice dinners he paid for in cash? Or would I have just kept going along, blissfully ignorant, until the police showed up at my door asking questions? I don't date much anymore. Trust issues, obviously, but I did learn something valuable. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when you find 4 wallets in your boyfriend's car that don't belong to him, maybe don't wait around for an explanation. Just run. Tyler took a plea deal. 3 years, possibly less with good behavior. The other members of the ring got similar sentences. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. Didn't need that closure. The closure I needed came from changing my locks, blocking his number, and never looking back. Sometimes I think about Kevin Chen and Marcus Williams and all those other people whose wallets I found. Wonder if they ever got their stuff back. Wonder if they know that a random girl on a road trip is the reason the person who stole from them finally got caught. Probably not. But that's okay. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And because I wasn't about to let Tyler turn me into someone who knew about crimes and did nothing. I gave my statement and never looked back. Discovering your partner's crimes is terrifying, but imagine finding out your sibling might be a killer. My brother Danny supposedly crashed his car into a tree late one night last October. Got the call around 11 from my mum, hysterical, saying Danny was in the hospital but he was okay. Minor injuries, nothing serious, but the car was totaled. I dropped everything and drove straight to the ER. Found him sitting on a gurney with some scrapes and bruises, looking shaken up but otherwise fine. He told us he'd been driving home from a friend's place when a deer jumped out in front of him. Said he swerved to avoid it and lost control, went straight into a tree off Route 47. Everyone believed him. Mum cried and hugged him, saying how grateful she was he was alive. Dad called it a miracle he walked away. The insurance company processed the claim without any issues and cut Danny a check for $30,000. The car was a total loss, so they paid out the full value. Danny seemed relieved it was over, said he'd use the money to get a new car and move on. Case closed, except I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. I'm a mechanic, have been for almost 10 years. I've seen hundreds of accident vehicles come through my shop, and I know what crash damage is supposed to look like. So a week after Danny's accident, I drove out to the impound lot where they'd totaled the car, told the guy at the desk I was family and wanted to see the wreck. He let me in without much hassle. The moment I saw Danny's car, I knew something was wrong. The impact pattern didn't make sense for what he described. When you swerve suddenly to avoid something and lose control, you get skid marks, you get angular damage, you get a chaotic collision point. This looked controlled. The front end was crumpled dead center, like the car had been driven straight into the tree at a consistent speed. No swerving, no evasive maneuvers, just a direct hit. I walked around the vehicle taking photos, checked the interior. That's when I noticed the airbags. They hadn't deployed. Now modern cars, the airbags are supposed to go off automatically in any significant frontal collision. It's a safety system that triggers based on impact sensors. For them not to deploy in a crash hard enough to total the car meant one of two things. Either the sensors had failed, which was unlikely in a 3-year-old vehicle, or someone had disabled them before the crash. I popped the hood and found the airbag fuse pulled. Someone had manually disabled the system, but that wasn't even the worst part. I opened the trunk to check for any other evidence and found a heavy-duty tow strap shoved in the corner under some jumper cables. The strap had fresh paint transfer on it, bright blue paint. I stood there staring at it for a solid minute before it clicked. Our cousin Mark drives a blue Chevy Silverado. I'd seen that truck 100 times at family gatherings. The paint was an exact match. I took the strap with me. Probably shouldn't have, but I needed to be sure. Drove straight to Mark's place and checked his truck. Sure enough, there was a matching tow hitch on the back and paint scrapes on the bumper that lined up perfectly with the transfer on the strap. Fresh scrapes. Recent. My stomach dropped. Danny hadn't crashed his car avoiding a deer. He'd staged the whole thing, and Mark had helped him do it. I didn't confront Mark, went straight to Danny instead, found him at his apartment that evening and told him I needed to talk. He knew immediately something was wrong from my tone. I laid out everything I'd found, the impact pattern, the disabled airbags, the tow strap, the paint transfer matching Mark's truck. Watched his face go from confused to pale to completely defeated in about 30 seconds. He broke down, just completely fell apart. Told me everything. Danny was $50,000 in debt from gambling. Online poker mostly, some sports betting. He'd been hiding it from the family for over a year, borrowing money from friends, maxing out credit cards, taking payday loans to cover the interest on other loans. He was drowning and saw no way out. That's when he came up with the insurance scam. He and Mark planned it over a few weeks, picked a remote stretch of Route 47 with no cameras. disabled the airbags so Danny wouldn't get hurt. Late one night, they towed Danny's car to the location using Mark's truck, lined it up with a tree. Mark pulled the car into the tree at low speed using the tow strap, just fast enough to do serious damage but slow enough that Danny could walk away. Then they removed the strap, Mark drove off, and Danny called 911 claiming he'd just crashed avoiding a deer. The plan worked perfectly. Insurance paid out. Danny used $20,000 to pay down his debts and was planning to use the rest to get clean and start over. He looked at me with tears running down his face and begged me not to tell anyone. Said he knew it was wrong, but he was desperate, that he'd already learned his lesson and would never do anything like it again. I told him I'd think about it and left. Spent the next 2 days barely sleeping, going back and forth on what to do. On one hand, Danny was my brother. We'd grown up together, shared a room until we were teenagers. I didn't want to be the person who destroyed his life. On the other hand, what he did was fraud. Actual criminal fraud. He'd stolen $30,000 from an insurance company and lied to everyone, including our parents, who'd been worried sick about him. Then came the breaking point. I was at a family dinner at my parents' place. Danny was there acting like everything was fine. Mom was going on about how thankful she was that Danny survived the accident. Dad was talking about guardian angels and second chances. And Danny just sat there nodding along, letting them believe the lie, letting them think he'd been the victim of some random accident when the whole thing had been calculated and staged. That's when I realized I couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about the insurance money anymore. It was about watching Danny manipulate our entire family while playing the role of grateful survivor. It was about knowing Mark was in on it too, and neither of them felt bad enough to come clean. I gave Danny one more chance. Pulled him aside after dinner and told him he had 24 hours to turn himself in, or I'd do it for him. He begged, offered me money, promised he'd pay back the insurance company somehow, said I'd be destroying his life over a mistake. I told him he'd already destroyed his own life the moment he decided fraud was easier than asking for help, that this was his chance to take responsibility before it got worse. He chose not to. 24 hours later, I walked into the local police station with photos of the wreck, the tow strap, paint transfer evidence, and a written statement explaining everything I'd found. Told them about my conversation with Danny and his confession. They took it seriously, opened an investigation. Within a week, they'd brought in both Danny and Mark for questioning. Both of them cracked pretty much immediately once confronted with the evidence. Admitted to the whole scheme. The insurance company was notified. Criminal charges were filed. Insurance fraud, filing a false police report, conspiracy. The whole works. Danny was arrested. So was Mark. Both of them posted bail, but the damage was done. Our family exploded. Half of them couldn't believe Danny would do something like this. The other half couldn't believe I'd turned in my own brother. Mum called me crying, asking how I could do this to family. Dad didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Mark's parents threatened to sue me for defamation until their lawyer explained that's not how defamation works. Danny's trial was fast. He took a plea deal, admitted guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. Got 18 months in county jail and full restitution to the insurance company. $30,000 plus interest and legal fees. Mark got probation and community service for his role as an accessory. The whole family is divided now. Some relatives think I did the right thing. That fraud is fraud and family doesn't give you a pass to break the law. Others think I'm a traitor, that you don't turn in your own blood over money, that I should have handled it privately instead of involving the police. Thanksgiving dinners are awkward as hell now. Half the room won't make eye contact with me. Danny won't speak to me at all. He's been in jail for 4 months now, and I've tried to visit twice. Both times he refused to see me. Sent word through the guard that he had nothing to say. Our mom keeps trying to mediate, saying we're brothers and we need to forgive each other. But there's nothing for me to forgive. I didn't do anything wrong. What really gets me is how people frame it. They act like I destroyed Danny's life by reporting him, like I'm the villain in this story. But Danny destroyed his own life when he racked up $50,000 in gambling debt and then decided insurance fraud was the solution. I just refuse to be complicit in covering it up. People say family is supposed to protect each other. That blood is thicker than water, and maybe they're right. But protection doesn't mean enabling. It doesn't mean watching someone commit fraud and pretending you didn't see it. Real family, real love, means holding people accountable when they mess up, even when it's hard, even when it costs you relationships. I sleep fine at night knowing I did the right thing. Could I have handled it differently? Maybe. Could I have given Danny more time to figure it out on his own? Possibly. But I also know that if I'd stayed silent, Danny would have gotten away with it. He would have kept that money, paid off his debts, and learned that fraud works, that lying to family works, that he could get away with anything as long as he looked pathetic enough afterward. And what happens next time he gets in trouble? Does he stage another accident? Does he find another scam? At what point does enabling him become worse than turning him in? I think about that a lot, whether I made the right choice, whether there was some middle ground I missed. But every time I come back to the same conclusion. Danny made his choice when he committed fraud. I made mine when I refused to be part of the cover-up. Those were both choices. Both of us have to live with the consequences. The family will either come around or they won't. Danny will serve his time and hopefully learn something from it. And I'll keep showing up to family dinners even when half the room hates me for it. Because at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and know I didn't compromise my integrity to protect someone who was actively lying to everyone who cared about him. Maybe that makes me a traitor in some people's eyes, but in mine, it makes me honest. And I'd rather be honest and alone than complicit, and surrounded by people who only love the version of me that looks the other way. Sometimes doing the right thing destroys your family, but other times, your family destroys itself long before you get involved. Mom walked out when I was 12 years old. I remember coming home from school one day and finding Dad sitting at the kitchen table with this blank expression on his face. He told me and my sister to sit down, and then he said Mom had left. Just like that. She'd packed a suitcase, written a note, and walked out the door while we were at school. Dad said she couldn't handle family life anymore, that she needed to find herself, that sometimes adults make selfish decisions, and we just have to accept them. I remember feeling this crushing sense of abandonment, mixed with anger that I didn't really understand yet. My sister cried for weeks. I just went numb. For 15 years, I carried that resentment like a weight. Mum sent birthday cards every year with generic messages and a check inside. She never called, never visited, never explained why she'd chosen to leave her own children behind. The cards always had different return addresses, like she was constantly moving, never settling anywhere. I stopped opening them after the first few years, just tossed them in a drawer and tried to forget about her. She died last year, heart attack, sudden. I got the call from a lawyer I'd never heard of, telling me she'd left me her apartment and personal belongings. My sister got a similar call. We were her only living relatives, apparently. No new husband, no other kids, just an apartment full of a life we knew nothing about. I drove out to her place the following week to start cleaning it out. It was a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood about 3 hours away. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and people still wave at strangers. Inside it was neat and sparse, minimal furniture, a few plants, books everywhere. It felt lonely, like a holding pattern instead of a home. I started sorting through her things mechanically. Clothes for donation, kitchen items to sell, photos I couldn't look at too closely without feeling that old anger resurface. I was in her bedroom, going through the nightstand, when I found it. A journal. Leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, the year she left. I sat down on her bed and started reading. What I found in those pages shattered everything I thought I knew about my childhood. Mom didn't leave because she couldn't handle family life. She left because Dad had been having an affair with her sister, my Aunt Linda. For 3 years, the diary laid it all out in painful detail. Mom had come home early from a work trip, 2 days before she was supposed to be back. She'd wanted to surprise us. Instead, she'd walked in on Dad and Aunt Linda, in the bedroom she shared with my father. Our family bedroom, in the house where her children slept. I had to stop reading for a minute. Just sat there staring at the words, trying to reconcile them with the reality I'd lived in for 15 years. Aunt Linda, the woman who babysat us, who hosted Thanksgiving, who'd always been around, always been part of our lives. But that wasn't even the worst part. The diary detailed what happened after. How Dad convinced Mom that if she exposed the affair, it would destroy me and my sister. That we were too young to understand, that we'd be traumatized by the truth. He told her she was being selfish for even thinking about telling us, that a good mother would protect her children from that kind of ugliness. Then he started gaslighting her, telling her she was paranoid when she questioned why Aunt Linda was at the house so often, saying she was crazy when she brought up the affair in arguments, making her doubt her own sanity while continuing to sleep with her sister behind her back. Mom wrote about family dinners where she had to sit across from Aunt Linda and pretend everything was fine, about watching her sister laugh with her children while knowing what she'd done, about the crushing isolation of carrying that secret alone because Dad had convinced her that telling the truth would hurt us more than his lies. She made a decision, a terrible, heartbreaking decision that I'm still trying to understand. She decided to leave, to remove herself from the situation entirely, rather than expose us to the poison that our family had become. She thought distance would make it easier, that if she wasn't there, Dad and Linda would end things, that maybe she could come back eventually and explain when we were older. But she carried that secret alone for 15 years, through every birthday card, through every holiday spent by herself, through her entire lonely life in that sparse apartment, and she never got the chance to explain because she died before we were ready to hear it. The worst part, though, was what I found near the end of the diary. Dad and Aunt Linda got married 6 months after the divorce was finalized. They told everyone they'd fallen in love after Mom left, that it was a beautiful second chance at happiness that grew out of shared grief and supporting each other through difficult times. I'd been calling her Aunt Linda at family dinners for over a decade. She'd worn my mother's engagement ring after having it reset. They'd both stood there at Christmas and Thanksgiving, playing the role of the happy couple, while my sister and I resented our mother for abandoning us. Every kind word I'd ever said to Aunt Linda felt like a betrayal now. Every time I'd rolled my eyes at one of Mum's birthday cards. Every year I'd spent angry at the wrong person. Then came the breaking point. I called my sister immediately. She came over and we read through the diary together, both of us crying, both of us trying to process this complete rewrite of our family history. Then we drove to Dad's house, the house we grew up in, the house where Mom taught them, where this whole nightmare started. Dad answered the door with that same jovial smile he always had, asked if we wanted to stay for dinner. Linda was making pot roast. I held up the diary and watched his face change, watched the color drain out of it as he realized what we knew. He tried to deny it at first, said the diary was probably fiction, that Mom had mental health issues we didn't know about, that she'd always had a tendency to dramatize things, but we'd read his name too many times in those pages, read his exact words, read about arguments we vaguely remembered hearing through bedroom walls, but hadn't understood at the time. When denial didn't work, he tried justification, said his marriage to Mom had been failing anyway, that he and Linda had a real connection, that he'd done what he thought was best for everyone by not forcing us to choose sides, that Mom had made her own choice to leave. I asked him if he knew she died alone, if he cared that she spent 15 years carrying his secret while we hated her for it. He didn't have an answer for that, just stood there in the doorway of the house that used to be our home, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Linda appeared behind him and I couldn't even look at her. This woman who'd helped tuck me in as a child, who'd braided my hair and taught me to bake cookies, who'd destroyed my mother's life and then taken her place like it was nothing. I told them both we were done, that I never wanted to see them again, that they could keep their pot roast and their lies and their performance of a happy marriage built on betrayal. My sister and I walked out together and we haven't spoken to either of them since. That was 8 months ago. My sister and I visit Mum's grave every week now. We bring flowers, we talk to her. We apologize for believing Dad's lies, for not trying harder to understand why she left, for every birthday card we threw away unopened. We've been going through the rest of her apartment slowly, found letters she'd written to us but never sent, photos she'd kept of us growing up, carefully organized by year, evidence of a mother who never stopped loving her children even though she'd convinced herself that leaving was the only way to protect them. I don't know if she made the right choice. Part of me wishes she'd told us the truth from the beginning, even if it would have been painful, but another part understands why she didn't. We were 12 and 14. How do you explain to children that their father is a cheater and their aunt is a homewrecker without destroying their entire sense of stability? So she took the weight of it herself. Let us hate her so we wouldn't have to hate him. sacrificed her relationship with her own children to spare us from an uglier truth. And whether that was right or wrong, it was an act of love. Twisted and tragic, but love nonetheless. I think about her a lot. Wonder what our relationship could have been if she'd lived long enough for me to read that diary while she was still here. If we could have had those conversations and worked through the years of misunderstanding. But I'll never get that chance. All I have now is a sparse apartment full of someone else's life, a diary full of secrets that came 15 years too late, and the knowledge that I spent most of my life angry at the wrong parent. My sister asked me the other day if I regret reading the diary, if ignorance would have been better. I told her no, because at least now we know the truth. At least now we can remember Mom the way she deserves to be remembered. Not as the woman who abandoned us, but as the woman who loved us enough to become the villain in our story, so we wouldn't have to see our father for what he really was. Mothers keeping secrets to protect their children is one thing, but what about mothers who keep secrets that destroy everything? My wife Jennifer had a business partner named Mark. They'd started a consulting firm together 2 years ago, some kind of marketing and brand strategy thing that I never fully understood but always supported. They spent long hours at the office together, working on client pitches and presentations, weekends sometimes, late nights frequently. I trusted her completely. She'd never given me a reason not to. We'd been married for 6 years at that point. High school sweethearts who got married young, built a life together, the whole storybook thing. Jennifer was driven and ambitious, always had been, so when she told me she wanted to start this business, I encouraged it. Told her to go for it. Even helped her set up the home office and drove her to networking events when she needed a second set of hands. Mark seemed like a decent guy from the few times I'd met him. Professional. Polite. They made a good team, according to Jennifer. Complementary skill sets or whatever business jargon she used. I had no reason to question any of it. One evening last November, I was home alone making dinner. Jennifer was upstairs taking a shower after a long day at the office. The house phone rang. We barely used it anymore, but kept it for some reason, probably out of habit more than necessity. I picked up and a man's voice said, "Hey, is Jennifer there?" I recognized it as Mark from the couple times we'd spoken before. I told him she was in the shower, but I'd have her call him back. Normal conversation. Nothing weird about it. Then he said, "Thanks, Tom. Tell her I'll see her tomorrow." I stood there in the kitchen holding the phone, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under me. My name is David, not Tom. Tom was Jennifer's ex-boyfriend from college. Her serious college boyfriend that she dated for 3 years before we got together. Why would her business partner call me by her ex's name? My brain immediately started running through possibilities. Maybe he'd just misspoken. Maybe he was distracted and said the wrong name by accident. People do that sometimes, right? But something about the casual way he'd said it, like it was natural, like that was just my name in his mind, made my stomach turn. I didn't confront Jennifer when she came downstairs, told her Mark had called and she said she'd call him back later. I watched her face for any reaction, any sign of guilt or nervousness, but she just nodded and started talking about what she wanted for dinner, like it was any other evening. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling while Jennifer slept peacefully next to me, running through that phone call over and over. "Thanks, Tom." Why Tom? How would Mark even know about Tom unless Jennifer had talked about him? And why would she be talking about her college ex-boyfriend to her business partner? I did something I'm not proud of. The next morning after Jennifer left for the office, I went into our home office where she kept her laptop. It was logged in. She'd always been casual about passwords and privacy between us because we'd never had trust issues. I'd never snooped before, never felt the need to. I opened her email and sat there for a second, feeling like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Then I typed Tom into the search bar. Hundreds of results, email after email after email stretching back 3 years. I clicked on the first one and felt my entire world collapse. Mark wasn't her business partner's real name. Her business partner was Tom, her ex-boyfriend Tom. They'd reconnected at a marketing conference 3 years ago and started an affair. The consulting firm was real. They'd actually started a legitimate business together. But it was also their cover story. The perfect excuse for why they spent so much time together. Why they traveled together. Why they had late nights at the office and weekend work sessions. I started reading through the emails chronologically. watching their relationship rebuild itself in real time. The first messages were innocent enough. "Hey, great seeing you at the conference. We should grab coffee and catch up." Then the coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into dinner. Dinner turned into "I've missed you, and I never stop thinking about you, and meeting you again feels like fate." Within 6 months of that conference, they were sleeping together. The emails were explicit, detailed. They talked about hotels they'd stayed at during business trips, conferences that were really just excuses to spend weekends together, client meetings that didn't exist. And here's where it gets absurd. They'd been planning their future together. The emails discussed leaving their respective spouses, waiting until the time was right, making sure their exit strategies were solid. They'd even looked at houses together, had a real estate agent sending them listings in another state where they planned to relocate once they went public with their relationship. I found spreadsheets attached to some emails, actual financial planning documents showing how they'd split assets from their divorces, what their combined income would be, projected costs for the house they wanted to buy. They'd been treating this like a business merger as much as a relationship. The emails referenced me occasionally. Jennifer called me her placeholder husband, said I was comfortable and safe, but she'd outgrown our relationship years ago, that she'd been with me since she was basically a kid and never got to explore who she was as an adult, that Tom understood her ambition in a way I never could. I sat there reading for hours, going through 3 years of correspondence documenting an entire secret life. They had inside jokes, pet names for each other, plans for a future that explicitly didn't include me. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tom was married too. Had been the whole time. His wife's name was Rebecca, and she had no idea. Same as me. Some of the emails referenced having to be careful around Rebecca, making sure she didn't get suspicious. Tom complained about her occasionally, said she was clingy and didn't understand why he needed space. These two people had built an entire relationship on lies while maintaining their marriages as convenient cover stories. They'd weaponized their spouse's trust to create the perfect affair. I printed everything, every email, every spreadsheet, every hotel confirmation and flight itinerary. Took me 3 hours and killed 2 ink cartridges, but I printed it all, made multiple copies and saved everything to a flash drive as backup. Then I called a divorce lawyer, made an appointment for the next day. Went in with my evidence, and the lawyer actually whistled when she saw the volume of documentation. She said this was the most clear-cut case of infidelity she'd seen in years, and that I'd have no problem getting a favorable settlement. I filed for divorce that week, had Jennifer served at her office, which in hindsight was petty but felt appropriate given that the office was where she'd built her lie. She called me immediately crying, asking if we could talk about this. I told her there was nothing to talk about, that I knew everything, and she should call her lawyer. Then I did something that probably crossed a line, but I didn't care anymore. I sent copies of the emails to Jennifer's entire family, her parents, her siblings, her close friends. I wanted them to know exactly who she'd become and what she'd done. Wanted to cut off any narrative where I was the bad guy or we'd just grown apart. I also tracked down Rebecca, Tom's wife, found her through social media and sent her a copy of everything. She deserved to know same as I did. Got a message back from her 2 hours later just saying, "Thank you." I had no idea. Both marriages imploded simultaneously. Jennifer and Tom's carefully constructed exit strategy fell apart because they'd been planning to leave on their terms at the right time, with maximum financial advantage. Instead, they got exposed and lost control of the narrative. The divorce was ugly but fast. Jennifer tried to argue that she deserved more of our shared assets because she'd built a successful business. My lawyer pointed out that the business was built on fraud and deception, and that I had documentation proving she'd used marital resources to fund her affair. We settled out of court. She got the consulting firm, which was ironic considering it was her and Tom's baby. I got our house, most of our savings, and my retirement accounts fully intact. She tried to argue for alimony, but given the circumstances, her lawyer advised her to drop it. Tom's divorce was messier from what I heard through Rebecca, who I stayed in touch with throughout the process. She went scorched earth, made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly what happened. Tom's reputation in their community was destroyed. Jennifer and Tom did end up together after everything settled. They're still running the consulting firm as far as I know. Living in that house in another state they'd planned for. They got what they wanted eventually, just not the way they'd planned. I think about that phone call sometimes. If Mark or Tom or whatever I'm supposed to call him hadn't slipped up and called me by his own name, would I ever have found out? Would Jennifer have eventually executed her exit strategy and left me blindsided? Or would the affair have just continued indefinitely while I stayed the placeholder husband? Part of me is grateful for that moment of carelessness, that casual thanks Tom that unraveled everything, because living a lie is worse than living alone. I'm doing fine now, better than fine actually. Started dating again, learned to trust my instincts, and I got rid of the house phone. Figured if someone needs to reach me, they can use a cell like everyone else in the modern world. Being called the wrong name is one thing, but some discoveries don't even require a slip-up. Brandon and I had been engaged for 6 months. We'd set a date for the following summer, booked a venue, started picking out colours. The whole 9 yards. Everything felt right. We'd been together for 3 years, lived together for 1, and I genuinely thought I knew this person inside and out. Turns out I didn't know him at all. It was a Tuesday night in March, nothing special. We were on the couch watching some cooking show, half paying attention, both scrolling on our phones during the boring parts. Brandon had just updated his phone earlier that day, one of those iOS updates that takes forever and makes you restart everything. His phone was sitting on the coffee table charging when it automatically synced to our Apple TV. The cooking show disappeared. Suddenly, the entire screen filled with photos. Wedding photos, beautiful outdoor venue, sunset ceremony, string lights everywhere, happy couple in formal wear. My first thought was that someone we knew had gotten married, and somehow their photos were coming through. Then I looked closer. The groom was Brandon. I felt my stomach drop. Grabbed the remote and started clicking through the album. There were hundreds of photos. Brandon in a full tuxedo, his arm around a woman in a white wedding dress, both of them smiling like it was the happiest day of their lives. Parents in the background, siblings, a whole wedding party, first dance photos, cake cutting, toasts, an entire wedding I knew absolutely nothing about. My hands were shaking. I turned to look at Brandon and his face had gone completely pale. He was staring at the TV screen like he'd seen a ghost. Reached for the remote, but I pulled it away from him. Kept scrolling. Every photo felt like a punch to the chest. There he was kissing another bride. There he was dancing with another woman. There he was cutting a cake that wasn't ours. I finally found my voice. What is this? Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Just this strangled sound. Then he lunged for the remote again, and I stood up, holding it away from him. Clicked on the photo details. They were geotagged. A resort in Maui, Hawaii. Dated 3 weeks ago. The exact same weekend Brandon had told me he was going to his college roommate's bachelor party in Vegas. He'd married someone else, while engaged to me. The room started spinning. I had to sit back down. Brandon was talking, words tumbling out too fast, but I couldn't process them. Something about it not being what it looked like, about needing to explain, about it being complicated. I told him he had 30 seconds to tell me the truth, or I was leaving and he'd never see me again. That's when everything unraveled. The truth came out in fragments, like he couldn't quite commit to full sentences. He'd gotten his high school girlfriend pregnant 2 years ago. Her name was Ashley. She lived in San Diego. He'd been supporting the child secretly, a little boy, sending money every month and visiting during his supposed work trips. All those weekends he'd told me he had to fly out for client meetings or conferences. He'd actually been in California playing dad to a kid I didn't know existed. I felt like I was listening to someone describe a stranger's life. This couldn't be the man I'd been planning to marry, but he kept talking, and the details kept getting worse. Ashley's family was traditional, religious. They'd been pressuring Brandon to marry her since the baby was born. Her parents, her brothers, everyone. Told him he needed to do the right thing and make an honest woman out of their daughter. So he did. 3 weeks ago, he'd flown to Hawaii with Ashley and both their families and gotten married in a sunset ceremony at a 5-star resort while I was home planning our wedding for the following summer. I asked him why. Why would he marry her if he was engaged to me? He said her family gave him an ultimatum. Either marry Ashley or they'd cut him off from his son completely. They'd file for full custody, take him to court, make it impossible for him to see the kid. He panicked and agreed to the wedding, thinking he'd figure out how to tell me afterward. Except he never did tell me. He came back from Hawaii, showed me photos of the fake bachelor party, told me stories about Vegas that never happened, and went right back to planning our wedding like nothing had changed. He'd been living a double life for 2 years, and had just upgraded it to include bigamy. I asked him if he loved me. He said no, said he loved me, that Ashley was just the mother of his child, and the wedding was just to keep her family happy. Like that was supposed to make it better. Like committing fraud and breaking multiple laws was somehow noble because he was doing it for his son. Here's where it gets absurd. I asked to see his phone. He refused at first, but I told him I'd already seen the wedding photos, so what else was there to hide? He handed it over, looking defeated. I went through his messages, found entire text chains with Ashley about their life together, her sending him photos of their son, him calling her pet names, conversations about when he'd be home, what they should do for date night, whether they should start trying for a second kid, while engaged to me. There were also messages with his mum. Turns out she knew everything. Knew about Ashley, knew about the baby, knew about the wedding. She'd been at the ceremony in Hawaii. I'd had dinner with this woman a dozen times. She'd helped me look at wedding dresses. And the whole time she knew her son was already married to someone else. I asked Brandon if anyone in his life didn't know about this. He admitted that most of his family and close friends knew about Ashley and the baby. Some knew about the wedding. I was apparently the only person completely in the dark. His entire inner circle had been lying to my face for years. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. All those family dinners where everyone smiled at me and asked about wedding planning while knowing it would never happen. All those friends who'd congratulated us on our engagement while knowing Brandon had a whole other family in California. I'd been the joke and didn't even know it. I told Brandon to get out. He tried to argue, said we could work through this, that he'd get the marriage to Ashley annulled and we could start fresh. I actually laughed. Asked him if he understood that what he'd done was illegal, that bigamy was a crime, that he'd committed fraud and could go to prison. He clearly hadn't thought that far ahead, just stood there looking panicked, like the consequences were only just occurring to him. I told him to pack a bag and leave, or I'd call the police right then. He left. The next day I called a lawyer, explained the situation, showed them the photos, the text messages, everything. They told me I had grounds to not only end the engagement but to report him for bigamy. I did both. Called off the engagement, kept the ring since it was a gift and he'd obtained it through fraud, and filed a report with the district attorney's office. Things moved fast after that. The DA took the case seriously. Brandon was charged with bigamy. Ashley found out through the legal process that Brandon had been engaged to someone else the entire time they'd been together. She filed for divorce immediately. Turns out she'd been just as clueless about me as I'd been about her. We actually spoke on the phone once, two women trying to piece together the lies we'd both been told. It was surreal. Brandon ended up divorced from both of us within 6 months. Lost his job when the charges became public. His family stopped talking to him, which was rich considering they'd all been complicit. He's paying child support now and has supervised visitation with his son. Ashley moved back in with her parents and is rebuilding her life. And I'm single, in therapy, and processing the fact that I almost married a complete stranger. People ask me how I didn't know, how I missed the signs. Honestly, I don't have a good answer. He was careful. The work trip seemed legitimate. He never slipped up on details. His phone was always password protected, and he never left it lying around. The only reason I found out was because of a random software update that auto-synced his photos to our shared Apple TV. If that hadn't happened, I might have married him. Might have found out years later when the house of cards finally collapsed. I think about that sometimes, about the alternate timeline where I didn't find out until after the wedding, where I became the other woman without knowing it, where I had kids with him and built a whole life on top of lies. The thought makes me sick. I dodged marrying a complete stranger, someone who could look me in the eye every day and lie about his entire existence. Someone who could plan a future with me while actively building a different future with someone else. That's not love. That's not even human. The ring is in a safety deposit box. My lawyer says I can sell it if I want. Part of me wants to throw it in the ocean, but mostly I just want to forget any of this ever happened. Technology has a way of exposing secrets, but sometimes the evidence is even more deliberately hidden. My sister Kara's boyfriend Josh disappeared on a Tuesday in late September. Just never came home from work. I got a call from Kara around 8 that night, her voice shaking, asking me to come over right away. She sounded terrified, so I dropped everything and drove to her apartment across town. When I got there, Kara answered the door and she looked terrible. Red eyes, mascara streaked down her face, hands trembling. But when I stepped inside and asked what happened, something shifted. She took a deep breath and her whole demeanor changed. The panic drained away and she became eerily calm, too calm for someone whose boyfriend had just vanished. She led me to the living room and we sat down. I asked where Josh was and she said he never came home from his shift at the warehouse. Said his phone was going straight to voicemail, that his car wasn't in the lot at his work, that none of his co-workers had seen him leave. She'd been calling hospitals and checking with friends, but no one knew anything. I pulled out my phone to call the police and Kara grabbed my wrist. Hard. Don't call the police, she said. Her voice was flat, final. Just help me clean. I stared at her. Clean what? She stood up and walked toward the back of the apartment without explaining. I followed her through the kitchen and into the garage. The apartment was spotless, everything in its place, surfaces wiped down, dishes done, but the garage was different. The concrete floor had dark stains near the center, fresh looking, still damp in some places. There were streaks leading toward the drain in the corner, like something had been dragged. Tools were scattered around that normally hung on the wall. A shovel leaning against the workbench had a cracked handle. Kara handed me a bottle of bleach and a box of trash bags, told me we needed to clean everything before morning. I asked her again what happened and she finally gave me an answer. She said Josh had gotten involved with dangerous people, that he'd been gambling, borrowed money from the wrong guys, couldn't pay it back, that they'd come to the apartment looking for him earlier that evening while she was out. When she got home, Josh was gone and the garage looked like this. She said the people who took him had called her and told her not to contact police or they'd come after our whole family, that we needed to clean up the evidence and pretend Josh had just disappeared on his own. I felt sick, asked if she was sure Josh wasn't just hiding somewhere. She shook her head, said she knew he was gone, that we just needed to clean and move on and keep our mouths shut to keep everyone safe. Nothing about this made sense. Josh worked at a warehouse making decent money. I'd never seen him gamble, never heard Kara mention him being in debt. And if dangerous people had really taken him, why would they leave evidence in the garage? Why would they call Kara and give her time to clean, instead of just making the whole thing disappear themselves? But Kara was my sister. She was standing there begging me to help her, saying our family's safety depended on it. So I picked up the bleach bottle and pretended to start cleaning while my mind raced. Kara went to the bathroom and I heard the water running. Soon as she was out of sight, I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. The stains on the floor, weird marks on the walls that looked like something had been scraped against them, the broken shovel, close-ups of the stains showing the texture and color. I took dozens of photos as fast as I could, trying to document everything. When Kara came back, I was pouring bleach on the floor. She seemed satisfied. We worked in silence for about 20 minutes, her scrubbing and me going through the motions while planning my next move. Then I told her I needed to run to the store to get more trash bags. She nodded, distracted, focused on scrubbing the concrete. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station. Walked in and asked to speak to someone about a missing person and possible foul play. They took me to an interview room and I showed them the photos, explained what Kara had told me. The detective's expression got more serious with each photo. They asked for Kara's address and I gave it to them. Told them she was there now, cleaning. The detective made some calls, asked me to wait. About 30 minutes later, another officer came in and said they'd sent units to Kara's apartment and to Josh's workplace. That they were checking hospitals and talking to Josh's family and co-workers. They took my full statement and told me to go home and they'd be in touch. I barely slept that night. Kept thinking about those stains, about Kara's too calm demeanor, about whether I'd just gotten my sister arrested for murder. Checked my phone obsessively, waiting for updates. Then came the breaking point. The detective called me the next morning, asked if I could come back to the station. I drove there expecting the worst. Sat down in the same interview room, and the detective looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. "We found Josh," he said. My stomach dropped. I asked where. Was he okay? The detective nodded. "He's fine, he's alive, and he's very confused about why we're looking for him. Turns out Josh wasn't missing. He was alive and hiding at our parents' cabin 3 hours upstate. Had been there since Tuesday afternoon. Kara knew exactly where he was the entire time. The detective explained what they'd pieced together. Josh had tried to break up with Kara on Monday night, told her the relationship wasn't working, and he wanted to move on. Kara didn't take it well, started making threats, told him if he left her, she'd ruin his life. He got scared and called our parents asking if he could stay at their cabin for a few days while things cooled down. They said yes. He drove up Tuesday after work and had been there ever since, phone off, trying to figure out his next move. Meanwhile, Kara had staged the entire scene in the garage. The stains weren't blood. They were red paint mixed with corn syrup. The detective had tested them. The broken shovel, the scattered tools, the drag marks, all of it was theater. She'd created a fake crime scene to frame Josh's new girlfriend. Because there was a new girlfriend. Josh had mentioned to Kara that he'd been talking to someone from work. That's what triggered the breakup conversation. Kara's plan was to make it look like Josh had been murdered, report him missing eventually, and then plant evidence pointing to the new girlfriend. She'd already created fake text messages between Josh and the woman, had screenshots ready to show police. The Dangerous People story was complete fiction, made up to scare me into helping her destroy evidence of what I thought was a real crime. If I'd helped her clean, I would have been an accessory to filing a false report at minimum. Maybe worse, depending on what else she had planned. I sat there in the police station feeling like reality had shifted. My sister had tried to frame someone for murder, had manipulated me into almost helping her cover up a fake crime, had lied so convincingly that I'd believed her completely. Kara was arrested that afternoon, charged with filing a false police report, attempted fraud, and a few other things I didn't fully understand. The DA explained that she'd wasted police resources and attempted to frame an innocent person for a serious crime, that even though no actual murder had occurred, her actions were still criminal. Josh filed for a restraining order, got it approved within a week, told the court he was genuinely afraid of what Kara might do next. Our parents were devastated. They'd always known Kara had issues with relationships, but nothing like this. This was calculated, planned, disturbing on a level none of us had seen before. Kara's lawyer worked out a deal, psychiatric evaluation and treatment in exchange for reduced charges. She's in a facility now getting help. The doctors say she has some kind of personality disorder that makes her obsessive and unable to handle rejection. That she'd been spiraling for a while, and Josh trying to leave was the trigger that pushed her over the edge. I visit her sometimes. She doesn't talk much, sits there staring at nothing, medicated and quiet. Sometimes she apologizes, says she doesn't know what she was thinking. Other times she acts like I betrayed her by calling the police, like I was supposed to help her frame an innocent woman for murder out of family loyalty. I don't know how to reconcile the sister I grew up with and the person who staged a crime scene in her garage. They feel like two different people. Maybe they always were and I just never saw it. Our parents blame themselves, think they missed signs when Kara was younger. I don't know if that's true or if some things just can't be predicted. All I know is I'm glad I took those photos, glad I didn't help her clean, glad I trusted my instincts that something was very wrong. Josh is okay now, moved to a different city, changed his number, started over. The new girlfriend stuck with him through the whole mess, which either means she's incredibly loyal or slightly crazy herself. Either way, they're together and Josh seems happy from what I hear through mutual friends. I sleep fine knowing I didn't help cover up what I thought was a real crime. Even if it turned out to be fake, the intention to involve me in something criminal was real. The manipulation was real. And my choice to do the right thing, even when it meant turning in my own sister, that was real too. Fake crimes are disturbing, but real family crimes that everyone pretends don't exist, that's a different level entirely. My mum had always been involved in charity work, or at least that's what I thought my entire life. She ran a non-profit for homeless youth, spent her days organizing fundraisers and donation drives, coordinating volunteers, the whole deal. I was proud of her, told people about her work all the time. Bragged about how my mum was out there making a real difference while other people just complained about problems on social media. Then the FBI showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday morning, asking questions about her activities. 2 agents, suits, badges, the whole intimidating setup you see in movies, except this was my actual living room, and they were asking about my actual mother. They wanted to know about cash deposits, wire transfers, international travel, specifically trips to the Cayman Islands. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about. My mom ran a small non-profit in Ohio. Why would she be going to the Cayman Islands? They exchanged a look. Then one of them opened a folder and slid bank records across my coffee table. My mum's non-profit had moved over $4 million in the past 3 years. $4 million. For an organization that was supposed to help homeless teenagers in a mid-sized Midwestern city, that seemed impossible. I told them there had to be a mistake. There wasn't a mistake. They walked me through the records, showed me transactions that made no sense, payments to vendors that didn't exist, salaries for employees who weren't real people, wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Panama, the British Virgin Islands, money coming in from donations and grants, then disappearing into a maze of fake businesses and shell companies. Almost none of it was actually going to help homeless youth. I felt sick. Asked them what this meant. They said my mum wasn't running a charity. She was running a money laundering operation, and they'd been investigating her for 18 months. The boyfriend's name was Marcus. I'd met him exactly twice. Once at a family barbecue where my mum introduced him as someone she was seeing. Once at Christmas dinner where he barely said 10 words and left early. Both times she described him as a businessman who worked in logistics. Import-export stuff that sounded boring enough that I never asked follow-up questions. Turns out Marcus ran a drug distribution network across 4 states. Cocaine, heroin, fentanyl. He had suppliers, dealers, runners, the whole infrastructure. And he had my mum. Her non-profit was how they cleaned the cash. Dirty drug money came in disguised as charitable donations, ran through the organization's accounts, came out the other side looking legitimate, and ended up in offshore accounts they both controlled. The FBI had been watching for a year and a half. They had surveillance photos of my mom meeting with Marcus, wiretaps of phone calls discussing shipments and payments in coded language, financial records showing the money trail. They had everything, and now they wanted to know what I knew. I told them the truth. I didn't know anything. I believed my mum was running a real charity. I'd attended some of the fundraising events when I was younger. Silent auctions and galas where people bid on donated items and wrote checks. I thought it was all legitimate. They seemed to believe me, said I wasn't under investigation, but I might need to testify if it went to trial. Then they told me they were executing search warrants that morning. My mum's house, her office, Marcus's properties. They were making arrests within the hour. I asked if I could warn her, and they said absolutely not. Obstruction of justice. I could be charged as an accessory if I interfered. So I sat in my apartment knowing my mum was about to be arrested and couldn't do anything about it. She called me from jail that night. One phone call, crying, begging me to understand that she'd gotten in over her head, that Marcus had convinced her it was victimless, that the money was going to help kids eventually. They were just managing it differently. I didn't know what to say, told her I needed time to process and hung up. But that wasn't even the worst part. I started thinking back through my childhood, all those charity events I'd been so proud of, the silent auctions where wealthy donors wrote big checks, the corporate sponsorships from businesses I'd never heard of, the donation drives that brought in duffel bags full of cash. How much of that had been real, and how much had been part of the laundering scheme? I went through old photos on my phone, found pictures from a fundraising gala when I was 16, me in a formal dress standing next to my mom and some donors. Except now I recognize some of those donors from the FBI's surveillance photos. They weren't philanthropists. They were part of Marcus's distribution network, using my mum's charity event as a social gathering while they discussed business. I'd been used as a prop, a way to make the whole operation look more legitimate. Look, the director's daughter is here. How could this possibly be a criminal enterprise? Every speech my mum had given about helping at-risk youth, every award she'd accepted for community service, every news article praising her dedication. All of it built on a foundation of drug money and lies. The case moved fast. Federal prosecutors don't mess around with money laundering and drug trafficking. My mum was arrested along with Marcus and 7 other people in their network. Everyone from suppliers to accountants who'd helped set up the shell company. The FBI seized everything. Bank accounts, properties, cars. My mum's house that I'd grown up in was forfeited as proceeds of criminal activity. My mum's lawyer pushed for a plea deal. said if she cooperated and testified against Marcus, they'd reduce her sentence. She took it, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering, and agreed to testify about the financial structure of the operation. In exchange, she got 6 years in federal prison instead of 20. Marcus got 25 years, refused to take a deal, went to trial, got buried under the weight of evidence against him. The others got sentences ranging from probation to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement. The hardest part wasn't even the arrest or the trial. It was recontextualizing my entire childhood through this new lens. Every memory I had of being proud of my mum's work was now tainted. I remembered being 12 years old and helping her pack care packages for homeless teenagers, boxes of toiletries and warm clothes that we'd hand-delivered to shelters. Had that been real, or had that been part of the performance while the real business happened in back rooms I never saw? I remembered her taking me to the nonprofit's office when I was in high school, showing me around, introducing me to the staff. Some of those people were now in prison. Others had been completely fake, names on a payroll that corresponded to no actual human being. The whole thing had been theatre. The nonprofit is shut down now, dissolved by court order. Any legitimate programs it might have run are gone. Kids who actually were getting help, if there were any, lost that resource because my mum decided to use a charity as a front for a criminal enterprise. That might be what bothers me most. Even if 90% of it was fake, there might have been 10% that was real, and she destroyed it. I changed my name, legally, went through the whole process to distance myself from her and from the case, moved to a different state, started over in a place where nobody knows my history or my family. When people ask about my parents, I say we're estranged and change the subject. My mum writes letters from prison. I don't open them. She has my address somehow, probably from my aunt who's one of the few family members still in contact with her. The letters pile up in a drawer unopened. Maybe someday I'll read them, but not now. Maybe not ever. People have asked if I'll visit her, if I'll be there when she gets out in a few years. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me knows she's still my mum, that people make mistakes and deserve second chances. But another part of me can't get past the fact that she looked me in the eye for years and lied. Let me believe I was the daughter of someone making the world better, when really I was the daughter of someone making it worse. I don't know if that's something you come back from. I don't know if I want to. The foundation of who I thought I was got destroyed when those FBI agents showed up. Everything I believed about my family and my childhood turned out to be carefully constructed fiction. And now I'm in my 20s trying to build a new foundation from scratch in a different city under a different name. When your parent is the criminal, it destroys your foundation. But when your workplace becomes the crime scene. I found the USB drive in the conference room after a budget meeting on a Thursday afternoon. It was just sitting there on the table, unmarked, no label, nothing to identify who it belonged to. I figured someone had left it behind by accident, so I grabbed it, planning to ask around and return it to whoever lost it. Back at my desk, I plugged it into my computer to see if there were any files that might indicate the owner. Maybe a resume with a name on it or documents with someone's email signature. Instead of personal files, I found folders with names that made my stomach drop. Payroll fraud, offshore accounts, NDA violations, vendor kickbacks. I should have unplugged it right then. Should have taken it straight to HR without looking further. But curiosity got the better of me, and I started clicking through the folders. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. My manager, Christine, had been systematically stealing from the company for 3 years. The files documented everything in meticulous detail. She'd created fake vendor invoices for services that were never rendered, approving payments to shell companies that funneled money directly into her personal accounts. Hundreds of invoices, thousands of dollars each, all adding up to way more than her salary should have allowed her to steal. But that wasn't even the worst part. She'd also been skimming percentages from employee salaries. Our department handled payroll processing, and Christine had access to make adjustments. She'd been shaving small amounts off people's paychecks, amounts small enough that most people wouldn't notice or would assume were normal tax fluctuations. $100 here, $50 there. Across dozens of employees over 3 years, it added up fast. There were also documents showing hush money payments to former employees. people who discovered pieces of the scheme and been paid off to stay quiet and sign expanded NDAs. I recognized some of the names, people who'd left suddenly, people who'd been offered generous severance packages that seemed odd at the time but nobody questioned. Turns out they'd been bought off. The total documented in those files was $1.2 million. Money stolen from the company over 3 years through various schemes that Christine had orchestrated and covered up. And it went deeper. There were emails showing that Christine had been selling proprietary client data to competitors, our biggest competitor specifically. They'd been getting our proposals and strategies for years, undercutting us at every turn, winning bids we should have won. We'd all thought they were just better at sales or had better relationships. Turns out they had our playbook because Christine was selling it to them for cash payments deposited into one of her offshore accounts. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling like I'd just uncovered something that would blow up the entire company. This wasn't a small issue. This was systematic fraud at a management level. This was the kind of thing that could end careers and possibly put people in prison. I copied everything to my personal drive. Every folder, every document, every email. Made sure I had a complete backup in case the USB drive mysteriously disappeared. Then I requested an immediate meeting with our CEO. His assistant said he was booked solid, but I told her it was urgent and involved potential fraud. That got me a meeting within the hour. I walked into his office with my laptop and the USB drive and told him I'd found something he needed to see immediately. He was skeptical at first, probably thought I was overreacting or had misunderstood something. But as I walked him through the folders and showed him the documentation, I watched his expression change from dismissive to concerned to absolutely furious. He called our general counsel into the office, then our CFO. Within 30 minutes, there were 5 executives in the room reviewing the evidence I'd found. By end of day, Christine was escorted out of the building by security. They didn't even let her go back to her desk, just walked her straight out while HR packed up her belongings. The company launched a full internal investigation that same evening, hired an outside forensic accounting firm to audit everything and trace where the money had gone. What I didn't anticipate was how bad the fallout would be. The investigation found that 3 other managers were implicated in various parts of the scheme. People who'd helped Christine create fake vendors, or who'd looked the other way when discrepancies were flagged. The fraud had been more widespread than anyone realized, and it had infected multiple departments. Then the news leaked. Someone at the forensic accounting firm, or maybe someone in our legal department, talked to a reporter. Within a week, there were articles about the scandal. Our company's name was all over the business section of the local paper and industry publications. Massive fraud uncovered, millions stolen, executives arrested. Our clients panicked, started asking questions about whether their data had been compromised, whether their projects had been affected, whether they could trust us at all. We lost 3 major clients within 2 weeks. They terminated their contracts citing breach of trust and moved their business to competitors. Ironically, some of them probably moved to the same competitor Christine had been selling data to. The company's reputation tanked, stock price dropped, new business dried up because nobody wanted to work at a company that had just been exposed for widespread fraud. Our CEO did interviews trying to reassure people that we'd cleaned house and implemented new controls, but the damage was done. Things went from bad to unhinged. The board decided the company needed to restructure to survive. That meant massive layoffs. They eliminated entire departments to cut costs. My department was one of them. Half the staff got laid off, including me. Got called into a meeting one morning and told my position was being eliminated effective immediately. 2 weeks severance and a generic letter thanking me for my service. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been the one to expose the fraud. I'd done the right thing and reported it to the CEO. And I'd lost my job anyway because the company couldn't survive the aftermath of what I'd uncovered. I got a whistleblower settlement eventually. The company's lawyers worked out a deal where I received a payment in exchange for signing an NDA about the specific details of what I'd found and how the investigation had gone. The money was decent, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like being paid to go away quietly. Christine is facing federal charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, theft, selling trade secrets. Her trial is scheduled for next year, and the prosecutors seem confident they'll get a conviction based on all the documentation she'd conveniently kept on that USB drive. Her lawyers are trying to work out a plea deal, but last I heard she's looking at serious prison time. The other managers who were implicated took plea deals, testified against Christine in exchange for reduced charges. Some got probation, some got short prison sentences. All of them lost their careers and their reputations. I found a new job eventually. Took about 4 months of searching, but I landed something at a smaller company in a different industry. The background checks were intense. Every potential employer wanted to know about my previous job and why I'd left. Explaining that I'd been laid off after exposing fraud at my last company was awkward. Some places saw it as a red flag. Others saw it as evidence I had integrity. Eventually, I found a place that appreciated what I'd done. But I'll never forget how one USB drive destroyed everything. How doing the right thing and reporting fraud led to losing my job and watching a company I'd worked at for years implode. How whistleblowing is supposed to be protected, but in practice it just makes you unemployable and suspect. I don't regret reporting what I found. Christine was stealing from the company and from employees and selling out our clients. That needed to be stopped, but I'm not naive anymore about the consequences of being the person who speaks up. The system is supposed to protect whistleblowers, but it doesn't always work that way in reality. These days, I'm careful about what USB drives to pick up. And I keep my head down at my new job. Learn my lesson about getting involved in things that aren't directly my problem. Maybe that makes me cynical, but it also keeps me employed. Corporate scandals are messy, but at least they're not personal, unlike what happened when someone's ex decided to wage war online. After I broke up with Derek for cheating, he launched what I can only describe as a full-scale revenge campaign against my entire life. We'd been together for 2 years. I'd found out he was sleeping with someone from his gym. Confronted him. He denied it at first, then admitted it. Then tried to convince me it didn't mean anything. I packed my stuff and left. Thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. Within a week, Derek started posting on social media. Long detailed posts about how I'd stolen money from him during our relationship. How I'd actually been the one cheating the entire time with multiple people. How I'd faked a pregnancy to trap him into staying with me. None of it was true, not a single word, but he wrote it all so convincingly, with so much fake emotion and detail, that people believed him. I watched my friend count drop in real time. People I'd known for years stopped responding to my messages. Mutual friends picked sides, and most of them picked his because his story was more dramatic, and he'd gotten to them first. I tried posting my own response explaining what actually happened, but it got buried under his lies. He was posting constantly, keeping the narrative alive, adding new accusations every few days. Then things escalated beyond social media. My employer started getting anonymous emails. Someone was claiming I'd been embezzling from the company, that I'd been falsifying expense reports and stealing from petty cash. My boss called me into his office looking concerned and showed me the emails. They were detailed. They referenced specific dates and amounts. They sounded credible enough that HR had to open an investigation. I knew it was Derek. Had to be. But I couldn't prove it. The emails came from a burner account with no identifying information. I cooperated fully with the investigation, showed them all my records, proved I hadn't taken anything. But the damage was done. My co-workers looked at me differently. There was this cloud of suspicion following me around the office even after I was cleared. My reputation was destroyed, online and offline. Derek had managed to poison every aspect of my life with lies, and I felt completely powerless to stop it. Every time I tried to defend myself, it just looked like I was being defensive. His lies spread faster and farther than my truth ever could. I thought about legal action, but my lawyer said defamation cases are expensive and hard to win, that I'd need concrete proof he was lying and that he'd done it maliciously. Screenshots of his posts weren't enough because he could claim he genuinely believed what he was saying. I was stuck. Then Derek made one critical mistake. It was a Friday night about 2 months into his campaign against me. I was home alone, depressed, scrolling through job listings because I was seriously considering leaving my company just to escape the stigma. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek's number. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. He was drunk. The message was long and rambling and full of typos, and in it, he confessed everything. He bragged about the whole scheme, said he'd made up all the accusations to teach me a lesson for leaving him, that I'd humiliated him by breaking up with him over some gym slut who didn't mean anything, So he decided to humiliate me back. He detailed every lie he'd told, the fake pregnancy story, the cheating accusations, the theft claims, even admitted he'd created fake screenshots of text conversations we never had using some app he'd found online. He told me about sending the emails to my employer, laughed about how they'd actually investigated me, said he'd considered sending them to my parents too, but decided that was too far. Like there was some moral line he wouldn't cross after already trying to destroy my career and relationships. The message kept going. He was so drunk and so proud of himself that he just kept confessing. Talked about how he'd gotten some of my former friends to help spread the rumors. How he'd paid a guy to create a fake social media profile, pretending to be one of the people I'd allegedly cheated with. How he'd been planning to keep it up for at least another month before letting it die down. He ended the message by saying I deserved all of it, and he didn't feel bad at all. Then he sent a follow-up text saying not to bother responding because he was blocking me after this. He just wanted me to know exactly how thoroughly he'd ruined me. I screenshot everything immediately, saved it to 3 different places, backed it up to the cloud. I wasn't letting this evidence disappear, but that wasn't even the worst part. I went back through my old messages and found more. Turns out Derek had drunk texted me twice before with smaller confessions that I'd ignored or not fully registered because I was too depressed to engage. He'd admitted to creating fake accounts, mentioned coordinating with friends to corroborate his stories. I had a whole evidence trail of him admitting to a coordinated harassment campaign. I spent the entire weekend organizing everything, put together a comprehensive post with screenshots of his confession texts, alongside screenshots of his public accusations, showed the contradictions, highlighted where he admitted to making things up. I included the anonymous emails to my employer with notes about how Derek had confessed to sending them. Created a timeline showing how his story had changed and evolved as he added new lies. Then I posted it everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Tagged everyone he'd lied to, every mutual friend who'd believed him, his family members who I was still connected with. Posted it to local community groups we were both part of. I wanted maximum visibility. The response was immediate. Within an hour, people were sharing it, commenting, apologizing. Friends who cut me off were sending private messages saying they were so sorry for believing Derek's lies. People were going back to his original posts and calling him out, sharing my evidence post in the comments. My employer saw it. HR called me Monday morning to apologize for putting me through the investigation and to let me know they were considering legal action against Derek for filing false reports. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide evidence for a potential lawsuit. Derek's own family turned against him. His mum commented on my post saying she was horrified and ashamed. His sister sent me a private message apologizing and saying she'd had no idea he was capable of something like this. They'd believed his version of events and felt betrayed when they saw proof he'd been manipulating everyone, including them. Derek tried to do damage control, posted a frantic response claiming his phone had been hacked, that someone else had sent those messages pretending to be him, but it was too weak. The timestamps matched his usual late-night posting patterns. The writing style was identical to all his other messages, same typos, same phrases he always used. Nobody believed the hacking story. He tried claiming I'd edited the screenshots, photoshopped them somehow, but people asked him to provide proof and he couldn't. He just kept insisting they were fake while providing no evidence to support that claim. Within 3 days, he'd deleted all his social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything gone. But the internet is forever. People had already archived his original posts and my response. Screenshots were circulating. The story had spread beyond our immediate social circle to the wider community. Things went from bad to unhinged. I found out through a mutual friend that Derek had lost his job. His employer had seen the posts and the evidence of his harassment campaign. Decided they didn't want someone capable of that level of deception and manipulation representing their company. They let him go, citing concerns about character and judgment. His lease was up the next month and he didn't renew. Moved to another state according to his sister, who I'd stayed in touch with. She said he was trying to start over somewhere nobody knew about his past. Good luck with that when everything is documented online forever. My reputation recovered. Slowly at first, then faster as the truth spread. Friends apologized and most of those relationships eventually healed, though some never quite got back to what they were before. My employer fully cleared me and even gave me a small raise as what they called a goodwill gesture, though I think it was more about avoiding a potential lawsuit. I got messages from other people, mostly women, saying Derek had done similar things to them. Not as extreme, but the same pattern. Lying about them after breakups, spreading rumors. One woman said he'd tried to get her fired from her job by calling her boss and making false accusations. There was a whole trail of toxic behavior I'd never known about. Looking back, the wildest part is how close I came to just accepting it, to letting Derek destroy my reputation and not fighting back, because I didn't think I had the tools to win. If he hadn't gotten drunk and confessed everything in writing, I'd probably still be dealing with the fallout of his lies. Still be the girl who allegedly stole money and faked a pregnancy and cheated on her boyfriend. Instead, I'm the girl who exposed a systematic harassment campaign with receipts. And Derek is the guy who ruined his own life by being too arrogant and too drunk to keep his mouth shut. Sometimes the truth just needs the right platform, and sometimes terrible people defeat themselves if you give them enough time and enough alcohol. Public exposure can be powerful justice, but nothing quite compares to the shock of discovering family you never knew existed. Grandma died at 92 years old, sharp as ever until the very end. She'd been living independently, managing her own finances, driving herself to church and the grocery store. When she passed peacefully in her sleep, we were sad but also grateful she'd lived such a full life and gone on her own terms. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Standard procedure, we all assumed it would be simple and straightforward. Grandma had always told us she'd split everything between her 3 children equally, my mum and my 2 uncles. She'd been clear about that for years, talked about it openly at family gatherings. No secrets, no drama, just a fair division of whatever she left behind. The whole family showed up to the lawyer's office. My mum, my uncles, their spouses, some of the grandkids, including me. We were there more for closure than anything else. A formality, a chance to hear Grandma's final wishes read aloud and begin the process of settling her affairs. The lawyer started reading the will. Standard opening language about being of sound mind and body. Then he got to the beneficiaries section and everything went sideways. I leave my entire estate, including my home, savings, investments, and all personal property, to Claire Hoffman. Silence. Complete confused silence. We all looked at each other. My mum's face was blank. My uncles looked like they'd misheard. The lawyer kept reading, but I couldn't focus on the words. Who the hell was Claire Hoffman? I'd never heard that name in my entire life. None of us had. The lawyer finished reading and looked up, clearly aware that this was not the reaction he'd expected. My uncle spoke first, asked who Claire Hoffman was. The lawyer explained that she was listed as the primary beneficiary and would inherit everything. The house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, everything worth approximately $800,000. Our family got nothing, not because we were disinherited exactly, but because there was nothing left to inherit after Claire Hoffman got everything. My mum asked if there'd been a mistake. If maybe this was an old version of the will. The lawyer assured us this was the most recent version, signed and notarized 6 months ago. Grandma had been very clear about her wishes. He had notes from their meetings where she'd insisted this was what she wanted. We left the lawyer's office in shock, spent the rest of the day trying to figure out who Claire Hoffman could possibly be. Googled the name, searched through Grandma's address book and old correspondence. Nothing. It was like she didn't exist in Grandma's life, except as the sole beneficiary of everything she owned. My uncle wanted to contest the will, said Grandma must have been manipulated or confused, that someone had taken advantage of her. But the lawyer had been clear that Grandma was completely lucid when she made these changes. Had even brought a doctor to certify her mental competency specifically to avoid this kind of challenge. We hired a private investigator, figured if we were going to understand what happened, we needed to know who Claire Hoffman actually was. Took him less than a week to find her. She lived 2 states away, worked as a teacher, had a family of her own, and according to public records, she was 73 years old. 73. That made her older than my mum, older than any of Grandma's known children. And here's where it gets absurd. The investigator found the connection through DNA testing records. Claire had done one of those ancestry DNA tests 5 years ago, looking for biological family. She'd been adopted as an infant and wanted to know where she came from. The test had matched her to Grandma with a probability of 99.9%. Mother and daughter. Claire was Grandma's daughter from before she married Grandpa. She'd gotten pregnant at 19 years old. This was 1951. Her parents were strict religious people, the kind who believed pregnancy outside marriage was the worst sin imaginable. They'd forced Grandma to give the baby up for adoption immediately after birth, sent her to a home for unwed mothers, made her sign the papers, told her never to speak of it again. Grandma had spent 70 years searching for that baby, decades before the internet made it possible. She'd registered with adoption reunion databases, hired investigators when she could afford it, never stopped looking, and 5 years ago a DNA test finally connected them. They'd been in contact ever since. Phone calls, letters, video chats. Claire had visited Grandma multiple times. They'd built a relationship that none of us knew existed, because Grandma had kept it completely secret. The investigator found letters between them, Grandma explaining why she'd never told the rest of the family, how she was afraid we'd judge her for the teenage pregnancy, how her own parents had made her feel so ashamed that she'd buried the secret for 7 decades, how she wanted to protect Claire from potential rejection by a family that might not understand. We contacted Claire. Had to. Couldn't just let her inherit everything without at least understanding the full situation. My mum called her and they talked for 2 hours. Claire was shocked to hear from us. Had no idea about the inheritance. Grandma had never mentioned it. She'd thought they were just building a relationship, making up for lost time. The money had never been discussed. Claire agreed to meet us, drove out the following weekend, brought her husband and her own adult children, our cousins we'd never met. We all gathered at my mum's house. This weird, awkward meeting of family members who were strangers. But that wasn't even the worst part. Claire brought letters from Grandma, dozens of them. Beautiful, heartbreaking letters about regret and lost time and a mother's endless love. Letters where Grandma poured out 70 years of grief over the daughter she'd been forced to give away. Letters where she talked about watching her other children grow up, while always wondering what happened to her firstborn. She wrote about the shame her parents had instilled in her. How they'd told her she was dirty and sinful, and lucky anyone would marry her after what she'd done. How Grandpa had known about the pregnancy and the adoption and had been kind about it, but how she'd still never felt worthy of discussing it openly. Grandma had wanted to tell us, had written drafts of letters to my mom and uncles explaining everything, but she'd never sent them. Too afraid of judgment, too afraid we'd think less of her for something that happened when she was basically still a child herself. Claire read some of the letters out loud and we all cried. My mum was devastated that Grandma had carried this secret her whole life, that she'd felt like she couldn't trust us with the truth. My uncles were angry at their grandparents, Grandma's parents, for creating an environment where a scared pregnant teenager was treated like she'd committed some unforgivable sin. Claire offered immediately to split the inheritance, said she'd never expected anything, and didn't feel right taking everything when Grandma had 3 other children who'd been in her life the whole time. My mom told her that wasn't necessary, that Grandma had clearly wanted her to have it. But Claire insisted, said family was more important than money, and she'd rather have relationships with us than $800,000. We ended up splitting the estate evenly, 4 ways instead of 3. Claire got the same share as each of Grandma's other children. We sold the house and divided the proceeds, distributed the personal items based on what each person wanted. Claire took some of Grandma's jewelry and photo albums, things that helped her feel connected to the mother she'd only known for 5 years. The money honestly didn't matter much in the end. What mattered was that we gained a sister, an aunt, cousins we never knew existed. Claire is part of our family now. We have Sunday dinners together when schedules align. She shares stories about Grandma's final years, conversations they had, things Grandma told her that she'd never told anyone else. Turns out Grandma had been a completely different person with Claire, more open, more vulnerable. She talked about her fears and regrets in ways she never had with her other children. Claire got to know a version of Grandma that we'd never seen, and through Claire's stories, we got to know our grandmother more fully too. I think about what Grandma must have felt, keeping that secret for so long. The weight of carrying the shame her parents had placed on her for 7 decades. The fear that her family would reject her, or think less of her if they knew the truth. She could have told us any time, could have introduced us to Claire, but the trauma of how she'd been treated at 19 had been so deep that even at 90 years old, she couldn't bring herself to speak it out loud. In the end, the will was her way of making sure Claire was taken care of and acknowledged. Her final act as a mother to the daughter she'd been forced to give up. And it gave us a gift we didn't know we were missing. A bigger family, more love, more connection. We visit Grandma's grave together now, all of us, Claire included. Bring flowers and tell her we understand. That we wish she'd told us, but we get why she didn't. That we love her and we're grateful she found her daughter before it was too late. And that's where we'll end tonight's journey through Reddit's darkest confessions and most shocking revelations. From roommates hiding bodies to grandmothers hiding daughters, these stories remind us that everyone has secrets. Some just happen to be more devastating than others. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're officially part of the family. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment letting me know which story shocked you the most, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Your story could be featured in the next video. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, the truth always finds a way out, whether through a synced phone, a forgotten USB drive, or a grandmother's final wish. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.